Uh, Very good afternoon, everyone. And can I please just start by I just like to remind everyone that if you are not the presenter or speaker today, please turn off your webcam and put your microphone on mute so that the internet bandwidth connection quality will not be affected. Thanks so much. Okay. Um, Warm welcome again. Hello, everyone. Distinguished guests from both Australia and Korea, colleague and research student. Very warm welcome to you. And first of all, thank you very much for joining the event today. My name is Vin Thai. I'm currently a faculty member at the Department of Supply Chain and Logistics Management at the School of Accounting, Information System and Supply Chain within the College of Business and Law of RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia. Today, it is our pleasure to organize the inaugural symposium, uh, which is part of the activities of the so-called Developing the Australia-Korea Supply Chain Resilient Research Capability Platform project, which is a project funded by the Department of Foreign Trade, of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Australia, and with the within the framework of the Australia-Korea Foundation. Um, so first of all, I would like to introduce Professor Nava Subramaniam, who is currently the Deputy Dean, Research and Innovation within the School of Accounting, Information System and Supply Chain of RMIT University, who will be giving the opening remark as well as the acknowledgement of country. So Professor Subramaniam, the floor is yours now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rin. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes.
So good afternoon, everyone, and also good morning to some of our colleagues here from South Korea today. Firstly, thank you for this invitation to be part of this historic event today, the inaugural symposium by the Australia-Korea Supply Chain Resilience Research Capability Platform. It's been one of the longest titles I've come across, but it's really exciting, and I just can see this research capability platform having an enormous impact. You know, it's got great potential to make enormous impact. So with all our formal occasions at RMIT University and also in Australia, I would like to acknowledge the people of Waiwurrung and Woonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nations, whose unceded lands we conduct the business of the university. And also, on behalf of RMIT University, I respectfully acknowledge their ancestors, elders, past, present, and future. And as we say, Womanjika, that means welcome in our First Nations people's language. What you are seeing on the screen here shows that the First Nation people of Australia have been very closely connected with the concept of supply chain. They were fantastic developers, almost contributed to the development of early supply chain systems. This is an image that you see that was what they call Dr. Blendowski's encampment on the Murray. Blendowski was a explorer and a geologist in the 1850s. And so this is the Murray River. Actually, it's a confluence where Murray River and Darling River come together. And the first settlers arriving in Australia used to go through, it was wilderness literally, you know, and so they had to go through this river system. The river system was very important, and there was a very important supply chain that grew around the river system. So this is one of the pictures, and I hope our South Korean colleagues here today, you know, and people from outside Australia would appreciate the difficulties and the contributions that the First Nations people made in the early days when Australia was developing. This is an encampment where rice, sugar, basic necessities, they would come and settlers would stay there, rest, move on from that encampment. So that's a little bit of history. So moving on to more formal matters for the day, I would like to firstly thank and congratulate the organizing team of today's symposium, in particular to Professor Kim Sang-yeol, Dean of Graduate School of International Studies from Busan National University, South Korea, and also Associate Professor Wing Tai from RMIT University for doing such a great job and bringing together the symposium and the program. My also special thanks goes to the two keynote speakers today, Professor Muhammad Kudus from Curtin University and Dr. Chan Ho Kim from Korea Maritime Institute. Looking forward to hearing your keynote, as well as thank you to Professor Prem Chetri as Head of Department of Supply Chain and Logistics in Logistics Management in our school, who I know is a very inspirational leader and for guiding this whole project through. I believe that the subject matter today, which is really about supply chain between two nations that are very strong, have got very strong economic backgrounds. In 2019, we had South Korea as the 12th top-ranking economy, and Australia as the 13th top-ranking economy in the world in 2019. And also South Korea was Australia's third largest export market, and Australia was the fourth largest trading partner in 2019. So there's a very big economic nexus between the two nations. This symposium is also, I believe, very vital for the world. Some people like to say post-COVID. I don't think we could actually say post-COVID, because really COVID still continues to threaten and restrict the world in so many ways. What I would say is that in this current pandemic restricted world, the topics that have been discussed today, the health of a supply chain, the integrity of supply chain is highly, highly critical. We know that academic institutions play a very important part in developing knowledge, disseminating that knowledge, and making practice and making a difference in the world for the well-being of communities as well as economies. So I'm so proud to be part of this school where we have supply chain experts in our school who do wonderful work. And with this research capability platform, I believe sharing that knowledge and working with our Korean counterparts would be a wonderful opportunity to really elevate, make a difference. As you can see, you have, this is I'm an accounting researcher, and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that you see on the screen, they are a rock for me, a fundamental premise where a lot of my own research around governance and accountability, I get inspired through these goals. So I hope that today some of these goals would also be part of the ongoing and forward future projects that can be guided more and more by the SDGs. So as Sustainable Development Goals, as you know, were agreed to by the 169 UN members, and the goals that you see here, they aim to be a guide or a roadmap to a better, as they say here, 17 goals to transform our world for a better world, not only economically, but also social and community well-being wise, and also environmental. So for us to prosper and be in a much better elevated well-being, it is very important that we understand that development needs to happen sustainably, and supply chains are so important to bring that integrity, to bring that honesty, and also to be efficient, efficiently be servicing both or all the people, all the actors along a supply chain. So I'm thinking about some of the good work people do around a supply chain in the manufacturing industry, such as garment or the maritime industry. What I'm wearing today here as a scarf, has gone through so many different people's lives. The cotton, the coloring, the making of that garment, and the supply chain along that needs to be as full of integrity. It needs to be not threatening, someone's livelihood. So having that equity, the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 10 is reduced inequalities. A good supply chain would enable reduced inequalities. It would enable better gender equality. And most importantly, it would also enable peace and justice through strong institutional frameworks. I also note that reshoring is very another challenge that the COVID-19 has thrown up, and reshoring is bringing that manufacturing capabilities back to home country. I know South Korea, for example, the Hyundai Motors shut down after the February 2020 COVID breakout, was a very telling kind of signal, asking whether do nations have industry, innovation, and infrastructure in place to enable sustainable development. So it goes to partnership. I think the future of supply chain, the integrity and the quality of supply chains lies in partnerships. Partnerships, which is SDG 17, Partnership for the Goals, and SDG 16, where you have proper governance and lawmakers who can support good supply chains. We have in Australia the Modern Slavery Act that has come into being. The Modern Slavery Act requires companies to above $100 million, I believe, income. There is an income threshold, but they have to report on the integrity of their supply chains. So, so there is so much happening in this space. I wish everyone, and I thank all the presenters today for making time to be part of the symposium and offering your insights and rich wisdom. I'm sure that by end of the day, we will all be a lot more wiser, and hopefully through the Sustainable Development Goals lenses, we get to some very exciting new projects. So wish you all the very best, and thank you very much once again for having me.
Thank you very much, Professor Nava Subramaniam from the School of Accounting, Information System and Supply Chain of RMIT University, for your very warm welcome, and also very interesting talk about the link between sustainability as well as the main theme of our symposium today, which is about supply chain resilience. No doubt that link has been established many years ago. However, today it has been really highlighted in the UN SDG, the Sustainable Development Goal. Thanks again, Professor Nava, for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next in the items agenda today, we have a little bit of sharing about the project background. So let me just share content. So I hope everyone can see my share slide. So basically, this inaugural symposiums is part of the activities of the project that we are currently conducting here at RMIT in collaboration with our partner, Busan National University, specifically the Graduate School of International Study. So this project is currently supported by the Commonwealth through the Australia-Korea Foundation, which is part of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And just a little bit about the information of the project. The timeline, as I mentioned earlier, the project is actually supported by the AKF, Australia-Korea Foundation, within the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade of the Australian government. And in terms of the project timeline, we have until the end of this year to complete. Talking about project team, currently from the RMIT University in Australia, we have my colleague in the department, which include Dr. David Tunton, Dr. Zaid Halim, Dr. Aswini Yadlapali, Dr. Priya Prapta Chahori, Dr. Rizal Suman. And from our Korean partner side, we have Professor San Yong Kim, the Dean of the Graduate School of International Study within Busan National University, as well as Dr. Hui-Mi Chang, who is currently the Assistant Professor within the Graduate School of International Study of PNU. Now, just a little bit about the project background. Professor Nava Subramaniam have mentioned earlier about the current mutual bilateral trade between Australia and South Korea. And as you can see from the share screen, up to the point before COVID pandemic, we have experienced a very strong mutual trade and investment relationship, as you can see, across the time periods from 2013 until 2019. In terms of the trade value, has been going from strength to strength. And the major Australian export to South Korea include 4 major commodities, including coal, iron ore, natural gas, and red meat like beef. And Australia actually imported from South Korea in terms of refinery petroleum. So and then passenger motor vehicle like car and electrical machinery and electronic integrated circuits as well. With the COVID, unfortunately, it has left a lot of impact on global trade as well as supply chain. As you can see from the left-hand side of the share screen, this is from the latest report from the World Trade Organization, and you can see that it has impacted the world trade in a negative manner significantly, and both in terms of the optimistic and pessimistic scenario. The general finding from this is that it will take at least 2 years so that trade can go back to the pre-COVID 2019 level. On the right-hand side, you can see from the 2 bar graphs, this has been affected world trade in terms of merchandise trade as well as commercial services have been affected negatively, with exceptions of the last quarter of 2020. So we are still on the recovery, although very, very, very slow. According to WTO again, COVID-19 has negatively impacted merchandise trade. I mean, the recorded statistic is a little bit better compared to the forecasted figure roughly half years ago. So the official recorded statistic is that trade into 2020 actually reduced by only 5.3%. However, when we compare that with the negative impact on trade caused by previous pandemic like SARS, reduced world GDP by 0.1%, and the swine flu also by 0.1%. So far, COVID-19 has negatively impacted global trade significantly compared to the previous pandemic. More importantly, from the supply chain perspective, we have noticed that this pandemic has created unprecedented, which is the word that is commonly used nowadays, right? So this pandemic has created unprecedented disruption to the global economy and world trade, because production and consumption are scaled back across the globe. And according to some other research or consultancy report, which I quoted here from Roland Berger, they say that COVID-19 had bigger impact on most industry compared to the great financial crisis of 2008. And therefore, within this context, building supply chain resilient capability is important, is essential. The objective of this project is to develop and sustain a joint supply chain resilient research capability platform, leveraging on the existing collaboration between RMIT University and Busan National University in South Korea. And the expected outcomes is to build the supply chain, the Australia-Korea supply chain resilient research capability platform. But on the road leading to that, today's inaugural symposium is one of the first activity after we have done an intensive desktop research. And then based on the outcomes of this inaugural symposium, we'll be then proceeding to design and then later pilot and launch the Australia-Korea supply chain resilient research capability website. And then we will also initiate some staff and student exchange program between the two universities. And toward the end of the year, we'll be aiming to organize the Australia-Korea Supply Chain Resilient Conference 2021 in Busan. And hopefully from now until the end of the year, COVID situation will be improved so that travel can be gradually allowed again. And on that word, I would like to also invite all participants of the inaugural symposium today to attend the Australia-Korea Supply Chain Resilient Research Capability Conference in Busan, and we will be communicating the information about this conference in due time. Regarding this inaugural symposium, it is meant to showcase the existing supply chain resilient research between the two academic between the two countries, and we also aim to showcase the research and expertise of academics in Australia and Korea in this domain, particularly in supply chain resilient research and other related research. And the other important objective of today's symposium is also to identify prospective collaborations research project between academics and academics, as well as between academic and the industry, which we hope to be able to find out right after the panel discussion later on. So that is a little bit of background about the project as well as the inaugural symposium. Thank you very much for your attention. And next in the program, I would like now to invite Professor Sang-Yeon Kim, the Dean of the Graduate School of International Studies from Busan National University, our partner in this project, to give a welcome from the Korean partner side as well. So Professor Kim, the floor is yours, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, all the participants. My name is Sang-Yeon Kim, Dean of the Faculty of GSIS. Firstly, I would like to express my deep gratitude to RMIT University, Australia, in particular to Dr. Bin Tai and Dr. Hyun-Mi Jang, as well as other research teams, Dr. David Trungton, Dr. Jahid Halim, Dr. Ezwini Adrapali, Dr. Priyaba Brata Chaudhary, Dr. Rajaul Shuman. Yeah, thank you all for your enthusiasm, dedication, and hard work. I highly appreciate it. So that Busan National University can collaborate with RMIT University in a project entitled Developing the Australia-Korean Supply Chain Resilience Research Capability Platform. This is an interesting project. We all know that COVID-19 pandemic has a broad impact on industry, especially in the global supply chain. Every country takes preventive measures to reduce the spread of COVID-19 with policies and regulations. However, these policies and regulations affect trade between countries, including South Korea and Australia. South Korea and Australia's trade continue to grow and strengthen their ties, which was marked by the Korean-Australia Free Trade Agreement in 2014. Since then, the bilateral trade volume of Korea and Australia has continued to increase, reaching 4.3 billion Australian dollars in 2019. So that South Korea occupies the fourth position in the list of Australian trading partners. However, the disruption provided by this pandemic tested the resilience of the supply chain, so that in 2019 and 2020, the trade volume of Korea and Australia decreased by 13%. Therefore, we need a solution to face these challenges. One solution that we can do is to develop and maintain a collaborative platform for conducting industry-focused research between scholars in both countries, as well as between scholars and industry, in particular supply chain resilience. Yep. Thus, ladies and gentlemen, before I end this speech, I would like to give my appreciation once again to the entire research team, organizers, and to those who helped carry out this project. And especially thanks to Professor Naba Subramanian and Prem Chetri and all the presenters and session chairs and panel members and also keynote speakers. Thank you for your participation and cooperation, because without this good teamwork, this project would not have run smoothly. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Kim, for your very insightful welcome. And I would like now to start the keynote presentation session. And on this occasion, I would like to invite Professor Prem Chetri, who is currently the head of the Department of Supply Chain and Logistics Management within the School of Accounting, Information System and Supply Chain of RMIT University, who will be moderating the session. So Professor Chetri, the floor is yours when you're ready, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Wintai. Can everyone hear me clearly? Yeah. Womenjika, good afternoon and warm welcome to the inaugural Symposium, Australia-Korea Supply Chain Resilience Research Capability Platform. As been mentioned earlier, my name is Prem Chetri. I'm the moderator or chair of this keynote presentation today. The job that Wintai has allocated me entails two things. First is to introduce the keynote speakers, and later on facilitate Q&A. Few housekeeping requests, if I may. I would like to encourage all of you to pose any questions or comments that you have for the speaker in the chat box. Others may rank those questions by clicking on thumbs up icon. I will then provide the opportunities for speakers to respond to those questions a little later, in particular the ones which received the highest number of votes. Your thumbs up. Just a bit of a background of this particular session. So disruptions caused by the COVID-19 clearly highlight and indicate how just vulnerable global supply chains can be. Most global surveys conducted lately highlight almost 75% of businesses have experienced supply chain disruption as a result of COVID-19. To survive and thrive in turbulent time, organizations, of course, need to improve how they deal with unexpected disruption in complex supply chain. To make supply chain more resilient, organizations should develop and deploy robust supply chain strategies. It has already been proven that contemporary supply chain practices designed to keep costs low in a stable business environment increase risk levels. Just in time and lean production methods, whereby managers work closely with a small number of suppliers to keep inventories low, can make companies more vulnerable to lack of. Adopters of resilient thinking have already demonstrated how they can augment traditional risk management practices with new capabilities that help them to anticipate, prepare for, adapt to, and recover from disruption. In some cases, they are able to treat disasters as opportunities for gaining competitive advantage. Certainly, COVID-19 pandemic is a good time to learn what matters in order to make supply chain more resilient. In this background, I would like to introduce the speakers today who are highly experienced, amazingly innovative, and bold in their approaches to drive change via COVID. Without further delay, I invite our speaker, Professor Muhammad Quadras, School of Management and Marketing, Curtin University's Australia. The title of his talk is Supply Chain Resilience and COVID-19. The second speaker today is Dr. Chan Kim, PhD Research Fellow, Korean Maritime Institute, South Korea. And the title of his talk is A Study of the Impact of Security and Resilience on Port Sustainability Performance. Each of the speakers today will have 25 minutes to present their views on this particular topic. I'll begin by a presentation with a short bio of Professor. Dr. Muhammad Quadras is a professor at the School of Management and Marketing at Curtin Universities. Professor Quadras has published over 300 papers in literary journals. His publications appeared everywhere in multiple journals, including the top-tier journals, I would say, including Omega, International Journal of Production Economics, European System, Decision Support Systems, among many others. Professor Quadras is known as a really global thought leader and one of the unique ones who has done an enormous amount of work. He has successfully supervised over 55 doctoral students. In 1996 and 2005, he received 2 times he received the Researcher of the Year award at the Business School. He was Deputy Dean and Dean of Research. He was a director of Curtin Graduate School of Business. Professor Quadras also acted as a consultant in a number of international agencies, including Saudi Petroleum. And second speaker today is Dr. Chan Ho Kim, who is a research fellow in Port Research Division, Korean Maritime Institute. He received a PhD degree at Seoul National Universities, the top universities, one of the top universities in South Korea. Dr. Kim has undertaken several government projects as well as several international consultancies in the port sector. His main research interests include the area of port operation, port development. Without further delay, again, I may invite Dr. Quadras to present his talk. Mr. Quadras, the stage is yours. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Good morning from Perth. Of course, good afternoon in Melbourne. Can you all hear me and see me?
Very clearly, we can see you very
Okay,
clearly.
that's good. Let me try to share my screen. I hope it works. Just hang on for a sec. Where are we? Can you see the screen?
Yes, Professor, I can see. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, I'll try to, because the time is only 25 minutes, so I'll try to make it probably finish on time. Thank you, Professor Chetri, for a nice introduction. I'm not an expert, I'm still learning. I've done some work in this area, published in some journal, but believe me, I'm still learning. So the title of my talk is Supply Chain Resilience and COVID-19. So in terms of agenda, I'll go through quickly the need for studying resilience. And I know that our colleagues who are participating in this symposium, they're all expert of resilience, they know supply chain, they know sustainability. So I'll not spend much time on that. I'll then move into supply chain resilience and go into some resilience measurement models, including some of my work that I have done. Then I'll go into crisis management and lesson that we learned from COVID-19. Dr. Vin has presented some of the impact of COVID-19. I'll move on from there and present some more. And then some of the ways that the resilience capability has been sort of kind of models have been introduced to improve resilience within supply chain as a result of COVID-19. And lastly, I'll quickly present a model called real supply chain, which is very related to response to COVID-19 pandemic and so on. So roughly that would be what? Well, if you look at this diagram, then you can understand that how can you describe somebody to be resilient? Well, here we have resilient trees. They're trying to survive in harsh climate. Okay. Moving on, Charles Darwin said that it is not the strongest or most intelligent that survive. It is the most adaptable to change. We all adapt to a situation, we all change. If you look back to yourself, your background and so on, including myself, we have adapted to a situation and come up to the level that we are. And my background is engineering. So moved from engineering to management and then moved on. Now, why resilient? I'll give you some facts and figures in here very quickly. So this example is widely cited in many literature. We know about 2011 earthquake that we had in Japan, but we also now know that prior to that in 1869, we had earthquake in the same place. But that particular earthquake did not have much impact because all supplies were fed locally by horses and cart and so on. So the rest of the world, they felt nothing. But you all know what happened in 2011. That resulted in tsunami and rest of the world felt tremendous impact because we all depend on Japan in terms of supply chain, global supply chain and so on. So building collapsed, supplies disrupted. So we had a real problem, a real crisis in that particular event. Another example, again, I've used it in my papers. So you can see that Ericsson, for example, had a problem with their suppliers plan being under fire. So their response team was not very well activated, so they were late and so on. So the result was about $400 million loss. But funnily, in the same plant, Nokia gets supplies, but they had a very quick response time and fire happened in the same plant and they could manage, they could overcome the disruption very quickly and effectively. So that gives you the difference between late response and quick response. We all try to become reactive to the problems and to the crisis that we have. That's okay, but if your team is quick to respond, then I think you can overcome the problems a bit quickly. Another example, in 2005, this particular store in UK, Primark. They had a warehouse fire in their area, so that resulted in a $50 million loss. But that incident happened in Tuesday, November 1. By next day, Wednesday, 8:30 a.m., they had an alternative supply operational. So you can see how quick they responded to the event. So really, to be resilient, when you become reactive to certain events, you need to be quick in your response and get back to normal as soon as possible. Why resilient? Because we have a lot of problems, hurricane, tsunami, floods, financial crisis, global warming, and that sort of thing. Okay, so we need to monitor these likely events to prevent, to detect, and to respond in time. So that's why we need to have, we need to ensure that we have resilient supply chain with our partners and so on. Moving into some basic definition, I will start from the very basic definition by Holling, 1973. We all use it in our paper. It is simply stated as resilience is the ability of a system to absorb changes. Okay, but things have moved from there. It's not only absorb changes, it's really moving into a new state and perhaps in a better state. So other definitions are that it is a system's ability to recover and return to original state. In organizational context, resilience is the organizational capability to survive in a turbulent environment. So you can see the capability term comes in here. That's why the way I view making supply chain resilient is really making your capabilities, enhance your capability with your assets and resources so that we can recover from this problem quite fast. Now, in terms of types of resilience, I'll go over very quickly. There is individual level, team level, organizational level, and so on. Okay, we work most of the time in supply chain area, which is really beyond the organization because it really affects and impacts your suppliers and customers and so on. So that is the ultimate thing that we deal with. But at the individual level, there has been a lot of research, primarily from psychology and psychiatry point of view. We know many examples of some kids or some children, they're doing very well despite their family not so well background. So they are resilient. We know examples of resilient patient. Okay, so some people, some patients, they have the ability to cope with any kind of traumatic situation compared to other people. There are works on resilient customers, resilient tourists. In tourism area, there has been a lot of work on resilient tourists. Some tourists, despite knowing the problems they will have in visiting, some tourism site, they will still go there. Okay, and there are resilient customers also, despite problems having, buying a product or getting a service from some company, they'll still stick with that. So at the individual level, there has been a lot of work in resilience. At the team level, this is a gap. So there has not been much work at the team level. Okay, it could be a quality control team, it could be a project team, try to build something and so on. So there has been a lot of thought about it, but team resilience, which lies between individual and organizational, the research is very little. Okay. We can think in terms of social capital because when a team works together, they develop a capital and we call it social capital. So there is opportunity to do good research in dealing with team resilience and using the concept of social capital in there. Now, moving into organizational resilience, each organization has its perfect storm. Every organization. We can think about the pandemic that we had since last year, and we are all in academia, so we know that problem that we had in, for example, at Curtin, in my university, at RMIT, and every other university that we see, within Australia and also globally. We have done some work in that area. So one of the way that we develop to get out of organizational problems is develop something called vulnerability map. Okay, It shows you all kinds of vulnerability that you have within your organizations, and then you develop some policy and strategy to counter those vulnerability problems that you might have. I mean, one of my former students, Dr. Akid, worked on LNG supply chain in Australia. So this is what she developed, okay, about the vulnerability map of LNG supply chain in terms of financial vulnerability, strategy vulnerability, geopolitical and environmental hazard vulnerability, and operational vulnerability. So if you sit down as a team and work on this sort of vulnerability sources that you have in your organization, and you develop a map like this, then you can prioritize, what vulnerable is more severe and more likely to happen and so on, and what sort of policy and programs you can develop to counter, to mitigate those things. We have done some work on that, like way back in 2008-9, we did some work in developing a vulnerability map of automotive and electronic industry in Brazil. And we found out there are 4 dominant vulnerability, like financial, strategic, hazard, and operational. So depending on your organization and getting the concept of vulnerability, you can customize the vulnerability map that you can see from here to a specific situation, the problem that you're really dealing with. Now, let's move into supply chain resilience. As I say that I have done some work in this area, along with my colleagues, Dr. Maruf Chaudhary, and I understand that Maruf has a presentation sometime today in the symposium. So we define supply chain resilience, we call it SCREE, as the characteristics of a well-designed supply chain network with proactive and reactive capabilities. So remember that we emphasize resilient as a capability of a supply chain or of organization in terms of proactive and reactive, which enables the supply chain members to reduce the probability of disruptive events. Okay, we cannot avoid the disruptive events completely. We cannot avoid the impact of COVID-19, but we can minimize it. So we can reduce the probability of disruptive events to take the organization to a stronger and more sustainable state. Okay, so that's what we believe in, that we have to move it to a better state, more stronger and more sustainable. The basic definition given in early 70s of resilient was really to get out of these disruptive events and get back to normal and so on. But we believe that we have to go beyond that, because there is a problem. You have to reinvent the wheel, do things in a better way. So why not try to move it to a stronger and more sustainable state of the supply chain? This is the model we came up with. Okay, we call it SCREE model. So we measure supply chain resilience of any organizational supply chain or global supply chain in terms of proactive elements. You can see there reactive elements and design elements. Okay, I'm not going into nitty-gritty of those, but the theory that we're using here is dynamic capability theory. How can you use this? Well, you can use it for self-assessment. So if you know all those elements in your organization, and what sort of proactive elements we have, or do you have any at all? What sort of reactive elements or reactive team you have to respond, to recover, and so on? And what sort of supply chain design elements you have? So if you can measure those, then you can assess the resilient capability of your supply chain. Then you can benchmark. You can benchmark with your competitor, see how they are doing in terms of being resilient in their supply chain. And then you can do something about it. If you really fall behind, you can try to improve in any of the elements, maybe the proactive ones, maybe the reactive ones, or design elements, and try to improve your resilience in the supply chain. There has been other models of measuring resilience, primarily in agricultural sector. I do some work on agricultural supply chain, like this one by Professor Hui in 2017. He came up with a model including these variables: resistance, absorption, capacity for restoration. We call it adaptive capacity. And he used secondary data from Australian agricultural sector, and he measured the resilience of wheat to drought, how wheat production has been resilient to drought that we have in the year 1991 to 2010. So he found the resilience capability varied year to year in terms of these variables. Okay, the methodology that he used is simple, factor analysis. But one of the problems that I find that they never use in explicit theory. And what is the theoretical, stance behind selecting these variables? Okay, so he found those variables in some database and used those to measure resilience of wheat to drought. There are other measures like measuring household resilience. So that's a FAO study. So these variables have been used: stability, social safety nets, access to public service, income and food access, adaptive capacity, and so on. Again, in this one, primary data has been collected from 2,087 households, and ACM have been used to develop the model, a resilient index. Again, the problem I see that no explicit theory has been used in this particular model. Another one very similar to that. This one used a number of variables, again in the household sector, but again secondary data has been used in here, no explicit theory and so on. So you can see there are a lot of, this is simply a snapshot of different resilient model that you can find out. There are other models, some of them are mathematical programming type, developing index and so on. So you can really take your pick, which one more suitable for your organization. By the way, there are also some international resilience standards. Okay, there is a British standard, 65000, and also ISO 22316. So they give a guideline to become more resilient. So these are primarily at the organizational level. And as you know, that if you go into supply chain, then you have to go beyond organization, dealing with your customers and so on. But at least they give you some, some things to think about and use that kind of benchmark to be more resilient within your organization. Now, since we are dealing with COVID-19, and COVID-19 is a crisis. So let's quickly look into crisis management. So there are many definitions, but basically a crisis is a disruption that physically affects a system as a whole and threatens its basic assumptions and its existence. So it is really everywhere, from basic assumption to existence of your organization, of your supply chain. We know that during pandemic, the supply chain really broke down completely. Okay, so that is really a crisis. It's an ill-structured mess. It affects the entire organization. It is low probable. It doesn't happen all the time, but whenever it happens, it has high impact. So some snapshot on crisis. So in terms of crisis management, Gandul has defined crisis in terms of predictability and influence possibility. How easy or hard to predict a crisis, or how easy or hard to influence it in terms of crisis management. So the question is, what kind of crisis is COVID-19? Okay, so if you follow Gandul's that typology, crisis matrix, so that's the crisis matrix. The predictability, easy to hard, and the possibility to influence the crisis, again, easy to hard. So COVID-19, it will definitely follow there. Okay, hard and hard. It is very hard to predict, and it is very hard to influence. Although, given the vaccines and all those things coming up, probably you can influence it slightly better than before. But definitely COVID is a pandemic and is a high level crisis that we have. In terms of crisis management, Mitrop is one of the scholars, has done a lot of work, and they came up with proactive and reactive ways of managing crisis. Which also we use in our supply chain measurements and so on. So in terms of proactive, like signal detection, preparation, prevention, and so on. In terms of reactive, damage containment, recovery, learning, and all that. So basically, the proactive and reactive crisis management is what is practiced in the literature. Now, let me quickly go over some of the lessons learned. 86% of supply chain are impacted by COVID-19 as of March 2020, and I'm sure it is more now. And during March, early to late March 2020, the effect raised from 80 to 95%. And this one really is a troublesome statistics. The world's largest 1,000 companies had over 12,000 factories, warehouses, and operations in quarantine regions. So you can see 12,000 factories affected as of March 2020. So surely we got to do something about it. The other things, the literature says that the COVID-19 really, materialized some textbook type supply chain risk. For example, we all know of panic buying. So what is panic buying? That is simply demand risk as we deal with in supply chain risk and so on. The closure of factories, okay, in China and elsewhere in the world, the factories have been closed. What is that? That is supply risk, okay? There has been also lack of transparency, which is control risk, because if you don't know enough, you cannot control it. So other statistics is, and this is done by WEC in 2020, that 50% of the companies surveyed, look at this, did not have business continuity plan, did not even know critical supplies and suppliers, did not have plans to cope with supply disruptions from China. Okay, that's a real problem. I attended a global symposium supply chain last year, 2020, and there has been talk of using parallel supplies and so on. Every company should have that. The problem here was the parallel supplier was from the same country, the same mostly affected country. So it doesn't help. Your primary supplier is, let's say, from China, and then your parallel supplier is also from China. So if something goes wrong there, then there's a real problem. During this COVID-19 thing, there has been a lot of talk. Management press suggested that we have to develop a recovery plan. We have to come up with collaboration suppliers and use technology. Well, who doesn't know that? We all know that. So literature on resilient supply chain have been dealing with these items again and again. So the suggestion was by WEC 2020, there is a gap between understanding of supply chain risk and literature than in the industry. So industry has to really do more in terms of making their supply chain more resilient, use more proactive and reactive elements in there. Now, I went through the literature and collected some of the strategy to improve supply chain resilience as a result of COVID-19. So let me quickly just touch on that. The one of them is low certainty need. So what this one suggests that you maintain ready to change resilience philosophy than ready to absorb. Okay, so absorb is really reactive and ready to change really proactive. So you have to balance between proactive and reactive. And you literally develop some redundant functions. Okay, and you should emphasize resilience along with efficiency. Currently, most of the resilience literature talks about becoming more efficient, making profit and minimize cost and so on, but build in resilience in there also, okay? And create more internal flexibility and configurability, okay? The next one, this is a better one, known as reconfigurable supply chain resilience. So that is in the year 2020. So suggestion here is that your supply chain should have the ability to reconfigure, okay? For example, we know from a pandemic situation that some luxury goods manufacturing companies, they reconfigured their supply chain and they started producing sanitizer, mask, and gloves. So they're good. So you can use agility, leanness, sustainability, and also become digital and so on. So the main thing is you have to have the ability to reconfigure. Viable supply chain. Okay, so viability is the ability of a supply chain to maintain itself and survive in changing environment. So main key element here is continuously monitor, anticipate, and adjust to dynamic environment. A classical example of that is Ford Motor Company. They had a viable supply chain model within their overall global supply chain. They launched it in 2020 due to COVID-19 and changed their production system and supplier base to produce face shield and ventilators. So they could really move quickly into a different form of suppliers and different form of supply chain to make things which matter most during pandemic. The other suggestion is AURA framework, active usage of resilient asset framework. This is really the key element here is designed for resilience, not designed for efficiency. Okay, so utilize your resources effectively to develop capabilities in terms of making, coming up with redundant supplies and so on, data-driven real-time monitoring, which is proactive, and flexibility and recovery plans, which is reactive. So these are some of the examples where, which have been suggested in the literature as a result of COVID-19 and making more supply chain more resilient. And you can see the main theme in all of those is primarily to emphasize resiliency as opposed to efficiency and so on. Now, I like this paper, even of 2021. He comes up with 10 research directions, and one of them is called agility and resilience. So suggestion here is agility and resilience assets to explore how agility assets can enhance resilience and vice versa. Well, we are doing some current research, and we call it developing a real supply chain. That is really combining resilient, agility, and leanness together. And one of my PhD students applying that in a food supply chain area. So this is how the model looks like. So that's the model. So you can see that we have resilience elements, we have leanness, we have agility, and leanness impact your food supply chain performance, so does resilience and agility. And not only that, resilience moderates the relation between leanness and performance. That means, if your supply chain is more resilient, then that element, that relationship will be enhanced more. And also that will moderate relation between agility and performance, meaning that if you have more resilient supply chain, then this relation, the impact of agility on performance will be enhanced. We have collected data and did some initial study using ACM, structural economic modeling, and the results are very encouraging. All are mostly significant and so on. But we are now moving into a better more direction. We are trying to use it fuzzy set quality comparison, comparative analysis, FSQCA, to find the configurations of resilience, leanness, and agility, meaning that what elements of resilience and leanness and agility combined will enhance your performance in a better way. Because using SCM only gives you that this is significant, that is significant, and so on. But we need to go beyond that. So we need to find all elements of resilience which will combine very well with leanness and agility and give you the maximum impact on supply chain performance. So that is our ongoing work right now. Well, finally, you ask yourself, how resilient is your organization? Coming from academia or industry, using any kind of model, we can have some idea. How resilient is your team? If you work in a team environment, your research team, your project management team, definitely you can ask yourself and use any of the model to do some benchmarking. And then how resilient are you as a person, as an individual? Okay, so that brings my last slide, that we say that for a business to survive, growth is imperative. And we know that if you increase the resilience, then your performance increases. So to me, ensuring resilience is also imperative, and that is not an option. So with that, I finish my presentation here. So I hand over to Professor Chetri, I guess the question answer session will be after second presentation, but I'm happy with that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Quadis. Delighted to hear such a deep analysis and wonderful insights on the complexity of this very burning topic. Thank you very much. I'm going to hold on to the questions. I got quite a few challenging one, but I'm going to move on to the next one, and then we'll go to pile all the questions together, and then we will have Q&A. So bear with me. So on that note, can I now invite our second speaker today, keynote speaker, who is going to talk about his title is a study on the impact of food security and food resilience on food sustainability performance. So I think the concept of resilience being, in this case, Professor Quadis talked about the broader theoretical framework and the implementation to the empirical work. Now, I think this is very much context specific, looking at the port supply chain. I'm really looking forward to hearing from Dr. Kim. I have already introduced Dr. Kim, so the stage is yours. Dr. Kim, if you are here, over to you. Thank you very much. You may start. Thank you.
Hi. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Yep.
And I believe that you can see my presentation material.
Certainly you can see.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyhow, it's on to make a presentation in front of your people. Anyway, thank you very much to give me a chance to present this kind of subject. My subject is a study on the impact of port security and port resilience on port sustainability performance. Actually, in Korea, resilience is a very new terms in the port industry, because the Korean government need to be thinking about the resilience, but not too much on this subject. So I do this study to introduce what is the resilience, what is the why it is important to maintain the port industry of Korea. So I can start. As this presentation material is a little bit similar to Professor Quadis and Professor Bin Tai in the project backgrounds. This last year, year 2020, was an unprecedented year of COVID-19, as you know that already. The pandemic has changed the world's economy or the situation. The GDP growth down, and the economic downturn of 2020 is the first of such magnitude since the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. And then the OECD area unemployment rate continued to decline in November 2020 to 6.9% from 7.1% in the October, but remained 1.7 percentage points above the level observed in February 2020 before the COVID-19 pandemic hits the labor market. This kind of graph shows the sum of impact of COVID-19 as Professor Quadis and then Professor Bin Tai already explained. And then world seaborne trade drops to 5.6% in 2020, according to the Shipping Intelligence Network. And then DROI also reported that the world container volume drops to 7.3% in 2020 due to the economic impact from the COVID-19. In other words, in the context of increased complexity and uncertainty and then contingence caused by globalization, unexpected threats such as COVID-19 caused an increase in social vulnerability. Therefore, the world is discussing a new normal after COVID-19, as you know that, and there is a resilience at the center of the discussion. U.S. government is talking about the reshoring, and the U.S. and the French governments they talking about the industrial sovereignty, and then EU community introduced open strategy autonomy to make new normal after COVID-19. However, social issues such as the need to secure resilience due to COVID-19 have always existed. As you know, the environmental issues in 1960s and the oil shocks in 1970s sparked the discussion on sustainability due to resource depletion. And 20 years ago, September 11, 2001, terrorist attacks in the US sparked the global discussions on security issues. In terms of unforeseen threats, security, resilience, and sustainability are terms that preparedness and then responsiveness in common. In particular, they have a common purpose of promoting the social and economic stability of the country, as well as the lives and property of the people by preparing for the responding to unforeseen threats. Therefore, security and resilience are closely related to social security, and social security can be realized when the social, economic, and environmental domains all operate within acceptable boundaries. However, in terms of post security, there have been many differences of opinion on the performance between post service providers and users. In addition, at the port side, port security and port resilience and port sustainability are carried out separately in Korea situation, resulting in redundancy of implementation and inefficient application. Therefore, there is a need for integrated field application of port security, port resilience, and port sustainability in response to unexpected threats. So my study aimed to carry out a survey of port security operators and shipping companies in Korea, and an empirical analysis of the relationship among port security level, port resilience, port security operations, port performance, socio-economic sustainability performance, and environmental sustainability performance, thereby finding justification for port security integrated port security management, port resilience, and port sustainability. Here's my study model. Here's port security level and the port resilience and port security operational performance, and then for the sustainability performance, I divided into two groups: the social and economic, and then environmental sustainability performance. And also I make the 9 hypotheses, as you can see it. This one. First one is the port security level will be positively related to port resilience. And then second one is here. Port security level is will be positively related to port security operational performance, and so on. You can see this paper. And then here's research tools. I surveyed port service provider, including operators and port authorities in Korea. And then I also surveyed for the port service users, shipping companies. And survey periods last year from August to September. And respondents, I make 253 respondents out of 2,000. And the analysis model, I used the structural equation modeling, and the analysis tool, I used R. And here is the model, models of goodness of fits, and then results of hypothetics test. As you can see, these tables. Finally, I come up with this tape pictures. Actually, the ports between the port security level and the port resilience, there is a highly relationships supported the hypothesis one, and then port resilience also has a strong relationships with the port security operational performance, and then port security operational performance has strong relationships with the social, economic, and then environmental sustainability performance. However, the port security level doesn't have a influence on the environmental sustainability performance, and then the social, economic sustainability performance. And also port resilience, in my study, doesn't have any strong relationships with between port resilience and the environmental sustainability performances. And then here is the two comparison results from the providers like port operators and the port users, shipping companies. Little bit different than the results that come out from my studies, as you can see. And here's my results. As a result of the study, there was no direct significant relationships between port security and port sustainability, or between port resilience and port environmental sustainability. However, there are some relationships among port security, port resilience, port security operational performance, and port sustainability. There is a meditating effect also, suggesting that port security and port resilience need to be managed in a systematic way to promote the port sustainability. And in addition, the port security level was found to have a significant effect on the sub-factors of port resilience, and such as absorption, adaptability, and recovery. However, the recovery factor was found to have a significant effect on the operators, which is the port service provider, but not on the shipping companies. In other words, the port operators and shipping companies, they had a different view on recovery as one of the sub-factors of port resilience. Therefore, from the perspective of port operators, it is necessary to share the goals of port security and port resilience with the shipping company, which is a business partner of port operators, and jointly promote the mutual benefit. In addition, in terms of the relationship between the port security level and the operational efficiency of the port security operational performance, for both the operators and the shipping companies, it was confirmed that the port security level has a significant effect on the operational efficiency. And comprehensively, it was confirmed through this study that the threat that could cause social disaster has diversified due to the nature of society, which has come become more complex due to globalization. From this point of view, the necessary of securing security and resilience of ports is very high importance. As such, port security does not simply means controls the access to port facility in this situation. Rather, mutual understanding among and efforts made by all stakeholders, including port operators as port service providers and shipping companies as service users, requires if they intend to achieve port security operation performance through controlled access and resilience for mutual existence and survival of ports, business regions, and countries both in the present and future. In addition, the conclusion, there is a need for careful integration and management of port security, port resilience, and sustainability, as well as compromise among all stakeholders on the goals of sustainable development in the social and economic and environmental areas. Based on my study, this year, I'm doing the finds out what is the measurements of the resilience in port industry, because there's lots of literature, researchers, and they suggest all kinds of factors to measure the resilience in the academic ways. But I think it is a little bit different from the academic ways and then the real industry ways. So this year, I'm looking for some other real factors for the measure the port resilience and port sustainability. Anyhow, thank you very much, and I'm sorry for my poor English skills. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim. Your English was fantastic. The messages that you sent across is clear to all of us. Thank you very much again. Now, we're going to move on to the Q&A, and we have already heard from prominent speakers on the field. So I have earlier requested the audience to post questions on the chat box, and I got a few of these listed here. So I'm going to start, if I may, with Professor Quarters. Professor Quarters, as you know, Australia, we have a lot of micro and SME type enterprises operating in our country. So when we talk about supply chain resilience, it's a lot more easier for the big corporate to actually come up with a strategy and implement that on a larger scale, on a global scale, the concept of supply chain resilience. But when it comes to small scale micro enterprises, my personal opinion is that they seem to struggle a lot. So when you're talking about supply chain resilience, what does that mean for those sorts of enterprises in Australia?
Well, I can see the question here in the chat box. Yeah, I mean, look, supply chain is not only for big organizations. If you think about a small grocery store somewhere in Melbourne Strait or Perth Strait, they have their own supply chain. Okay, it may not be a big one, but they get their supply from different sources and they carry them or whatever. So there are some supply chain issues there. So models and all the things that we see in the literature, they are of course primarily for medium and big organizations, but at the small level, you can really customize that for small level organizations. So small, micro, and those sort of people. In fact, one of my PhD students, he did studies on micro industries and how micro industry supply chain really is initiated and how that contributes to their profitability and so on. So yeah, so concept is there, but you have to customize it for that particular organization and so on. The earthquake example that I showed in Japan, in 1860 AD, all the supplies, everything was carried by cars and horses and so on. But there was definitely supply chain. Professor Nava presented the supply chain issues, and in the old days, so there's still supply chain was there. So definitely, the concept equally applies for small micro enterprises, but we have to customize it for that particular situation. Okay.
Thank you very much. So do you think smaller and micro scale enterprises are more adaptable to change compared to larger because of the autonomy in terms of the simplicity of decision making? Just a quick response on that.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I couldn't hear it.
So what I'm saying is because of the scale of operation,
yeah,
do small enterprises able to adapt faster than the larger organization because of the complexity involved in larger operation?
Yeah, well, if I understand correctly, the small organization, they operate in their own environment, okay, compared to large organizations. So the need for supply chain, the need for item that they would like to acquire to make things or sell and so on is there. But how that is acquired from their supply partners and so on depends on their particular system. Like very often in the literature we see that use technology, okay, IoT and that sort of thing to manage your supply chain better. Well, does it apply for micro-organization? Definitely not. But even then they deal with information, they deal with all those nitty-gritty. So the scale is different, and we have to really customize our services to meet that particular scale.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you. I have a question for Dr. Kim from Professor Vintai. Yeah. What he argues that theoretically, port security level may lead to port security operational performance first, and then it affects the port resilience either directly or through the modulating effect, rather than what you model illustrate, that resilience and then port security operation performance. So what is your view on this?
Oh, hold on.
So theoretically, port security level may lead to port security operational performance first, and then port resilience, rather than resilience and then port security operational performance.
Actually, in my study, yeah, the suggestion from the Professor Bintai is correct. Before starting this study, I imagine the port security level is need to port security operational performance the first, and then second is the port security level choose the port resilience. But in my study, it's a little bit different. The port security level is highly influenced on port resilience first, and then second one is the port security operational performance directly, because the port security level and the port resilience, some of the factors of a port security, port resilience is almost similar to. So, but it's highly depends on the study. Previous study, like written by the Bintai, Professor Bintai, and then some famous professor, they use this kind of subjects in the previous analysis. They suggest the port security level is a highly impacts on the port security operation and performance. But it's depends on the studies that there is some little bit changes, but his view on this, I agree with that.
감사합니다.
Yeah,
Dr. Kim. I have a question for Professor Cottis.
Yep.
Do you consider COVID-19 a black swan event? A typical black swan event is an unpredictable, as we all know, event that is beyond what is normally expected of a situation, and it has potentially severe consequences. So what do you think of COVID-19?
Well, I mean, if you go by the definition, then definitely it is a black swan event. It came suddenly. The world was not prepared for it. Had tremendous impact, really made everything upside down. So this is really definitely the typical example of black swan event, which is by definition comes suddenly and creates the havoc. I can also read the question. The second part of this question is that when looking at resilience, multi-level, and so on, do we have to go beyond supply network, industry, national level, and so on? Well, it again depends on your study context. Okay. For example, that student, Dr. Aki, who dealt with LNG supply chain, liquefied natural gas supply chain within Australia. So that is the national level context. So she developed the map, the vulnerability map that really takes the national, the risk, the vulnerable points, and so on. So that was really a national level supply chain. She didn't go beyond Australia though, because that will be too much, because LNG is given to many other countries, exported to many other countries. So she primarily dealt with within Australia and what sort of problems and prospect we have. So yeah, the supply chain, depending on the problem, may encompass your little organization, medium, or even at the national level. So it is definitely at the smallest level, definitely goes beyond your organization, even from micro industry. A small food shelf anywhere. Okay, they have to get supply, so it has to go beyond that particular micro industry to get supplies and everything. So definitely, when you talk about supply chain, goes beyond the organization, but whether it goes to national level and so on, that depends on the problem.
Thank you, Professor Cottis. Thank you very much. Dr. Kim, yeah. I was just reading some of these slides, and you mentioned about reshoring, industrial sovereignty, and open strategic autonomy, these concepts being lately used by different countries. And these are the indication of anti-globalization or deglobalization process. So in your opinion, how port will become resilient when there is a significant shrinkage in the trade volume as a reaction to those sorts of changes that are really taking place in global trade sort of movement? How will port become resilient and manage at the same time to continue their business sustainability?
I think in a port industry, port industry is a little bit different from the other industry, like food industry or the IT industry. Port industry is a little bit settled down on one position in one country or one area. So they have to deal with the others, the shipping companies. They have to share all kinds of information with the shipping companies. They cannot do by itself to promote my port is very good. My port is a good location. This kinds of some location and then productivity of the port itself is a helpful factor to gain, attract more people, more the cargos. However, in this kind of a situation like COVID-19, I think the information sharing with the shipping agencies, the shipping companies to share the future things with the future goal with this area. Some of the audience asked the Professor Quadros. I have a same interest in research something agricultural. How important is the digital and organizational integration for AESSC? This is the main thing, in my opinion, the key factor is the digitalization to show that the concept, there's carry cares and their goals with all the stakeholders. So my answer is the information sharing and with the state-art in IT schemes.
Certainly important. Yeah, you actually answered the question which I was about to pose to Professor Quadros, but I'll repeat it again here. I mean, just quickly, how important is digital and organizational integration?
You are fading out, Professor Chetri.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how important is the concept of digitalization and organizational integration for agriculture supply chain, in particular context of the ability to adapt to the changes that are taking place?
I mean, I agree with Dr. Kim. Definitely, that's the way to go. I'm going to use the technology where it is effective to use. Don't just use it for user's sake. But I have some interest on doing some work on agricultural supply chain and also, sustainable supply chain and using technology, primarily IoT is the way to go, wherever you can use it and make things more efficient and so on. But don't forget, in my slide, I presented that the traditional concept of supply chain is to really make things more efficient, minimize cost, make profit, and so on. But not at the expense of making things resilient, because when you make things resilient, the proactive elements and reactive elements, they are asset hungry. You have to set aside some resources and so on to have some proactive team, reactive team, and so on. So there the cost will come on. So the typical cost minimize, profit maximize way of making supply chain is not really a good thing nowadays. You really design your supply chain for resilient and then integrate the cost element and efficiency element in there as best as you can.
Thank you very much. My last question for the session is again for we all like Professor Quadros for some reason because of the amount of work he has done. So from my it's a question for me. From a theoretical perspective, as you highlighted, supply chain are proactively becoming more resilient to destructive event. So whether it's an individual level, team level, or organizational level, so they are becoming more proactive, more resilient to things. But at the same time, if you look at from other system perspective, say COVID-19, the COVID-19 itself, the virus is also becoming resilient to the changes that they confront in that system. So they are mutating, they are creating new strains. So it's just not human system is trying to adapt and not adapt, trying to become more resilient to those sorts of disruptions, but other system is also reacting in a similar way. So the question is, are we still going to talk about the whole debate about supply chain resilience, or maybe we can go to a path towards supply chain adaptability? Humans do need to now adapt to to challenge him. This virus is not going to go away. How do you think that debate is still valid? So over to you, sir.
Remember that so one of the model of supply chain as a result of COVID-19 is reconfigure. You have to reconfigure your supply chain. So meaning that when, in terms of COVID example, when new strain comes in, you probably have to block off one supply chain and initiate another one. And we have done that in a response in Australia. The government took deliberate action against UK virus or South African virus and so on, simply blocking off those supply chain, the travelers coming in from those countries and so on. So similar things we have to do if some supply chain is really problematic and new things are coming up, then you reconfigure your supply chain to really initiate the new elements in there. And adaptability, as you mentioned, is the main thing. And I think very early I presented that adaptability concept, that it is really the element of adaptability which really makes organization survive well, and also at the individual level. Yeah.
That's good.
So on that note, I really want to thank you for the speaker today. I'm extremely grateful for them for really presenting a very thoughtful and highly contentious sort of discussion debate today. Thank you very much. And you can see the reaction from the audience. This is just a unique opportunity for us to listen to the thought leaders on the topic. So on that note, I would now hand it back to the stage to the chair of the session, Professor Bin Tai. Over to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all, and thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Ray.
Thank you very much, Prem, and thanks so much, Professor Quadros and Dr. Kim, for your very insightful presentation today. And also, thanks a lot, Prem, for your excellent moderation. I think we have learned a lot of things during the keynote speeches today. So everyone, thanks for your participation up to this moment. And according to our program, we were supposed to have a 10-minute break. However, considering that we are actually now a little bit over time, I would like to request that we move on. And in the meantime, please feel free to grab a cup of coffee or tea and enjoy it while we continue with our program. So next in the agenda, I would like to introduce to everyone the two moderator of our next session, which is about research showcase. And for the research showcase, we have two sessions. Session one will be moderated by Professor Bui Kam from the School of Accounting, Information System and Supply Chain of RMIT University. And then followed by the second sessions, which will be moderated by Dr. Humi Chang, Assistant Professor at the Graduate School of International Study at Busan National University. So without further ado, Professor Bui Kam, if you are ready, I would like to hand over the floor to you. Thank you so much, Professor Bui Kam. Bui, you are on mute, sorry.
Oops, sorry, Wayne. I thought I actually have a time of coffee for a cup of coffee, but I don't now. But nonetheless, thank you for inviting me to chair this afternoon session. Good afternoon, everybody. Wuminchika, and to our Korean friends, 안녕하세요. We are going to have three very insightful presentations on supply chain resilience this afternoon by three very brilliant scholars. But before I call on the first presenter, I just want to quickly remind everybody that due to time constraint, and it is actually very tight now, we will not have individual Q&A sessions after each presentation, but instead we will have a joint Q&A sessions after all three presenters have completed their presentations. So our first presentations today is a systematic literature review on research studies focusing on COVID-19 pandemic in supply chain disciplines. It will be presented by Dr. Priyaprata Chowdhury, who is a rising star in our school. Since receiving his PhD from MIT in 2019, he has published in various top-tier journals such as Transportation Research Part E, International Journal of Operations and Productions Management, International Journal of Physical Distribution and Logistics Management, and Journal of Cleaner Productions, plus many more. I think his current research interests include supply chain risk and disruption management, supply chain resilience, supply chain sustainability, and strategic alliances in supply chains. I can continue, but I think I should stop here without further ado. So over to you, Dr. Chowdhury.
Thank you, Bui. Can you hear me? Is the sound clear?
Yes, Priyo.
Thank you, Vin. Just give me a second to share my slide. Can you see the slide?
Yes, please.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Priyabdata Chaudhary, as Dr. Bui mentioned, and I'm currently working as a lecturer in the School of Accounting, Information Systems, and Supply Chain at our MIT University. And today, I will present one of my recent articles that we published in Transportation Research Part E. And this article is all about a systematic literature review on COVID-19 pandemic-related supply chain studies. So, but before we proceed, before I proceed to discuss the findings or like the contents of this article, I'll just give you a background. I mean, how we started this article and why we thought to do this article. So last year, me and one of my co-authors, working on another article, and I was doing the literature review. And by the time I started doing the literature review for that project, which is a production recovery planning, we have seen only couple of studies in supply chain discipline considering COVID-19 pandemic. But when we submitted the articles and received the comments from the reviewers and the revision, we have seen, by that couple of months' time, there are plenty of studies has already been published considering supply chain and COVID-19 pandemic. And then I was updating the literature review for that project. And when I was updating the literature review for that project, I have seen there are many studies which are very close in terms of the contents. And there was lack of the theoretical justification as well as the methodological rigor. Then I shared that with my author, the other authors that for that project, that why don't you do a review on the articles that publish in supply chain disciplines considering COVID-19 pandemic. And then we started browsing for the article and once and monitoring the article that published, and continued the project until we submitted the article or revised the article and submitted it for this paper. So when I was listening the excellent talk from Professor Khuddus and Dr. Veen before and the starting even the keynote speech, they have already mentioned a lot of impact on COVID-19 pandemic in supply chain as well as in the economy. And by listening their talk, I took the opportunity to update my slide a little bit rather than focusing on the impacts that I had in my paper in the introduction section. What I would just like to briefly mention is that COVID-19 pandemic is definitely a unique and extraordinary supply chain disruption. However, this is not the only epidemic disruption that the supply chain or this is not the only disease outbreak that the supply chain or the business organizations have faced in the recent past. If we just take an example of the WHO tracked 1,438 epidemic outbreaks only between 2011 and 2018. So you have seen there are many supply chain disruptions, many epidemic outbreak that we have seen or the supply chain has faced in the recent past. However, because of the unique natures of the COVID-19 pandemic, and this has been termed in a different way. Someone said it is a unique supply chain disruptions. It is a global crisis. It is extraordinary supply chain disruption, and there are many more. Like to name this one, this COVID-19 pandemic, is because this one has deep uncertainty. We even don't know when we are going to get rid of this one, and whether we are going to see the new version of the new strain of the COVID-19 or the virus. It is already well known that it has long-lasting impact. So in the short term, we already have seen how supply chain has disrupted, and in the long run, this disruption will continue. And even in the post-pandemic situation, the companies or the supply chain will face the disruption, this disruption for a longer period of time. And the other thing is the previous epidemic or the disruptions may only impacted a particular node or a particular locations, because most of those outbreaks as in a particular region rather than the entire world. But these disruptions simultaneously impacted all nodes and edges in the supply chains. And the other thing is it has either simultaneous or sequential impact. Like one country just given the restriction, and another country is the restriction, or maybe these both countries are the part of the same supply chain, and therefore it has the ripple effect and the severe impact on the supply chain. Considering this significant impact of COVID-19, you have seen probably there are many journals that introduce the special issues on COVID-19 and considering the various topic in supply chains, and researchers also increasingly turn their attentions to the topic. So as I said, there are many articles was publishing in this area, and considering the content, we focused on the two things. What we really know so far in the context of COVID-19 in supply chain. So what is the content of the themes that is already from the article that is already published in supply chain discipline considering COVID-19 outbreak, and what can be done? What further can be done? So when we are looking for the second one, what further can be done, we did not only look at the articles that published in supply chain discipline only considering COVID-19 outbreak. As you can see, this research methodology or the research framework that we use is obviously that the main focus of this article is analyzing the studies on the COVID-19 pandemic, as you can see here. So what we have did is we initially looked at the articles that is in supply chain discipline and considered the COVID-19 outbreak, and we looked at the methodologies that they used in their studies. We looked at the context, whether this is in the developed country context or the developing country context. And then also we looked at the theories, whether they used the theory or not, and what sort of theories. And then we looked at the content, main themes that is in this article. And then rather than providing the future research opportunities only by analyzing this thing, we go one step further. And what we did is we also looked at the studies published in supply chain discipline considering any other prior epidemic outbreak. So in the same way, we also looked for the articles that consider other epidemic outbreak like the SARS, H1N1 or other epidemic outbreak, influenza and many more. And then we also looked for the other typical supply chain disruption like fire, theft, and many other incidents that supply chain is facing almost in every day. And we looked at themes published in these two areas, and then in combination with the studies published in COVID-19 and what we already know with other epidemics and supply chain disruptions, we provided the research opportunities that can be done, and that is unique and not done in the past, which is our objective too. And in searching the studies, initially we looked for the COVID-19 one. For searching the article, we started our search using the Scopus database. And the last date that we searched for the article is 28 September 2020. And we use the COVID-19 and other keywords. I'm not going to read this, and this is obviously in the paper, it's taken on the paper. And we initially identified 198 articles, and then we read those articles, read the abstract title, and then excluded 142 articles. And we have a clear set of inclusion and the exclusion criteria, why we should include an article and why shouldn't. And after that, we found total 56 articles to be analyzed and for this particular research. Then we looked at the other database, we looked at the Web of Science, and we also looked at the Google Scholar, and we conduct the reference check of those 56 articles to see if there can be other articles that we can include here. And we identified 77 studies from this search. And we found that 38 of these articles are duplicate that we already found in this 56. We removed them. And another 21 articles doesn't fit since it is within the exclusion criteria. And we could add 18 more articles, and that provide us total 74 in numbers. And we did the further reference check of these new articles, but we could not include any further articles. So which means that we analyzed total 74 articles in COVID, like in the supply chain discipline, considering the COVID-19. At the beginning, as we said, like we did some bibliometric analysis that is available in the paper, but not included in this presentation. But we looked at the methodology to see whether what sort of methodologies they used. And surprisingly, as you can see, like in the blue version, that is majority of the articles is just opinion-based articles. It's just the viewpoint that their researcher opinion or these sort of articles. And the other, as you can see, the green side, it is the second portion of article is the quantitative using the simulated data. And it can be said that yes, COVID-19 pandemic just a sudden event and happened recently, so the researcher could not get the time to collect the empirical evidence. But when I'm going to present it in the later slides, you'll see it's not only the COVID-19 pandemic, even with the other epidemic and in general in supply chain disruptions, the literature is mostly dominated by the quantitative and the simulated data. There is a lack of empirical evidence. And you can see we could only found 6 studies that use empirical data for analyzing, for their findings. 3 of them use the case studies, and 3 is the survey, but none of them use any the structural equation modeling or the regression or relationship testing. In terms of context, it is not surprising what we have seen, like when a disruption or a pandemic happened, initially the healthcare sector and the food sectors or the emergency products are initially disrupted, and the demand goes up. And hence you can see, like the food and healthcare supply chain was the key focus of the studies that we found. But in terms of context, it is nice to see that they consider the both developed and developing countries as per the definition of the United Nations. In our analysis, we found. And some article considered not only a particular country, rather consider a region like the Central European countries or South Asian countries like that. In terms of countries, Canada and India are the most considered context. One thing I think I would go with Professor Kudus that the lack of theories. It's not only even with these with COVID-19 pandemic related studies, we have seen out of 74 articles, only 5 studies mention theory in their articles. And these are the 5 articles that talk about the theories and they use the theories in designing the disruption plan or the resilience strategies. However, we have seen one study which rigorously investigated the different theories that can be used in the pandemic situations. And this study that Craig had published in Decision Science, it talk about the 10 different theories that we can use in investigating the various problem in various COVID-19 related problems. This article did not only talk about the possibility of using that, but also provided the research questions where we can fit these theories in each of these theories. Now to move to the main themes, I know it's not possible to explain all of them, and we have limited time for the presentation. Just to tell you, when we analyze the theme of the article, we found these 74 articles mostly talk 4 broad areas. And the highest number of articles we have seen, talking the impact of COVID-19 pandemic since it started. It is different types of impact that they are talking in the supply chains. And then the other studies they are developing the resilience strategies for overcoming the crisis. And 2 other themes that we found is the role of the technologies or the digitalizations in achieving those resilience strategies. And it's nice to see that few articles is discussing the impact on the sustainability due to this COVID-19 pandemic as well. So these are the 4 broad themes that we found. But as you can see, one article is basically talking more than 1 theme. Therefore, although there are 74 articles, you can see the 60, for example, 60 impacts and 47 is the resilience strategies. I'm not going to read this table. Just to summarize, these are the main focus of the article so far placed on investigating the impacts, but it's just not merely describing the impacts is every area of supply chain has disrupted demand, supply, transportation, production, relationship. It's just not only about the reporting. It's nice to see that like the articles measure the impact using the secondary data. So to what extent, and like some quantitative analysis of the financial performance or the sustainable issues, like the creation of the waste and all these things, like they measure the impacts, and also they look for the factor that affecting the impact. For example, we have seen like the financial performance has reduced, but what are the factors behind like that affecting those impact? And for example, one study found it is not the strictness of the lockdown, rather it is the duration of lockdown that is more important or more affecting the performance. Another studies found like the sequential or the simultaneous closure or the opening of the border is impacting the supply chain performance. Research also moved beyond further, like looking for the underlying reasons. Like for example, like we have seen for the demand management, as you can see, demand spikes for the essential products. But what are the reasons for those demand spikes? Is it basically the fear? Is it basically panic buying? And what are those things? And how to overcome those things? So the impacts and their underlying reasons have been investigated in the studies. Various resilience strategies have been designed, as you can see here. And today's the keynote speaker, Dr. Kudus, and another presenter who will be presenting today, Dr. Maruf, we use their study as a reference to analyze these resilience strategies to see whether the focus is on preparedness, response, or in the recovery. And just to summarize here, like the broad range of resilience strategies have been suggested, like but most like initially it comes with the prompt response for minimizing the impact. Eventually it goes for the restructuring, reconfiguring the supply chains, adopting the digitalizations, improving the collaborations at the national level, the supplier or the producers. I mean, the horizontal collaboration has been suggested in few studies, and a balanced focus of the different the functional areas and the strategic issues. The studies talk about the possibility of the technologies in achieving supply chain resilience, and it talk about the low-tech problems, low-tech solutions for for sufficient quantities of the medical equipment. Talk about the disruptive technologies, Industry 4, and talk about the additive manufacturing facilities like 3D printing. This talk about the mobile service operations to bring the product closer to the home of the customers. However, the thing is, all of these papers are mostly opinion-based and perspective-based, rather than providing a clear pictures how that can be implemented. Like for example, 3D printing is suggested, but to what extent a 3D printing can solve the production problem that we are currently facing? It's not investigated well in the report. We talk about the sustainable issues, and when it is talking the sustainability things, the two main areas we have seen. One is to explore the current sustainable issues, like the companies when they're looking for their performance and focusing only on the survival of the operations. They have seen like the less focus is given on other areas of the sustainability, like social sustainability and environmental sustainabilities. But few studies argued that in the post-COVID-19 pandemic scenarios, better sustainable practices they predicted, because they said like the companies will be more resilient by learning from this pandemic. We have also looked, as I said, we have also looked for the other epidemic outbreaks and what we have we learned from those epidemic outbreaks. And we found total 25 articles considering other epidemic outbreaks. And out of those 25, we have seen like most of them published, like unlike COVID-19 pandemic, it is going on and the article is publishing and publishing. But in other epidemic crises, the articles has basically published once in the post-epidemic scenarios. And therefore, the focus of those articles mostly on developing the resilience strategies for preparing the supply chain for future epidemic. And the three main areas that we have found is one is allocating the resources. It is argued that we need further resources, minimum budget. We need further resources for each area of the operations, and also like redesigning or reconfiguring the supply chains. These are the two areas for the preparedness, the supply chain. And therefore, the immediate impact, we talk about the backup supplier, creating the redundancies and all other stuffs. One thing, just to say, like mention, again, there is a lack of studies is considering SMEs. No study in 25. There is none of them use the theory. or the mathematical modeling is the dominating the methodology there. We have looked at the disruptions like other supply chain disruptions, but this is the area that we struggle to identify how we can go there, because thousands of articles already published on supply chain disruptions. And therefore, like it was difficult for us to identify the articles for the reviewing so that we can ensure the comprehensiveness of the review. But later on, we decided to go for the reviewed article. So reviewed article on supply chain disruptions. And we found 15 review articles on various areas of supply chain disruptions that reviewed the article until 2019. And then we searched for the article for that published in 2020 so that we can cover the entire supply chain disruption disciplines. And from that, we also identified 26 articles and reviewed the content and the themes. And we found that there are various issues as investigated in supply chain disruption, including identifying, ranking, investigating the impact by considering the complexity, network structures, and all these things. Also, like it also covered the formulation of the resilience strategies. And again, with similar to the prior epidemic or the pandemic, it is mostly dominated by the quantitative modeling with the simulated data. And SMEs is probably the one that was mostly ignored in supply chain disruption disciplines. In combination of these three disciplines, like three broad areas like COVID-19 pandemic, other epidemic, and supply chain disruptions in literature, we provided research questions in our article. And we provided research question in all four broad areas of the broad theme that we provided in our the paper, like impact, resilience, technologies, and the sustainability. And while we did this, we did not only look at the articles, what we know from supply chain, COVID-19 pandemic, rather we looked the entire the supply chain disruption disciplines and provided the future research directions. We also consider other aspects like the use of the theories. We also consider about the context and the methodologies in providing the future research opportunities. In summary, we have found in the articles 4 broad themes recurred in the published work. Most of the article may focus on the high demand essential goods and the healthcare products. And it is not surprising, as I have mentioned, like it's because of the COVID, like in epidemic or pandemic situations. Firstly, we initially focus on these areas. However, we have seen there is a lack of theoretically grounded and empirically designed studies. Therefore, the questions of the generalizability is still limited, and we identified that in our research and provided the avenues for future research. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Priyo. Thank you for your very informative review, although you took more than your 15 minutes fair share. Thank you. All right, we got to move very quickly over to our second presentation, which is by Assistant Professor Don Quack. I hope I pronounced the name correctly, Professor Dong or Professor Quack, who is going to tell us the result of his structural analysis of supply chain resilience called competencies. Professor Quack is with Yongpok National University in Korea. He obtained his PhD from Cardiff Universities, and his research won both the Dissertation of the Year Award and the James Cooper Cup from the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, UK. Professor Quack worked at Coventry University and the University of Nottingham before returning to Korea. He has published very widely in many internationally acclaimed academic journals, including the International Journal of Operations and Productions Management, Supply Chain Management, Transportation Research, Part and Maritime Policies and Management, Transport Review, Maritime Policies, and I believe there will be many, many more. So without further ado, over to you, Professor Quack. You ready?
Yes, I'm ready now. Yes, hello. Yes, so I'm gonna share my presentation. Just a moment. Screen windows. No. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Yes, just a moment, because I'm gonna make it bigger. Yes, okay. Yes, so today, yes, so the topic of my presentation is an interpretive structural analysis of supply chain resilience core competencies. Yeah, so this research has been published in a Korean journal. So the main reason was actually in Korean academia, so the concept of resilience hasn't been developed very well. Actually, when I was a PhD student at Cardiff Uni in the UK, so my PhD topic was risk management. And it was related to resilience as well, resilience, robustness, yes, so those kind of concepts. So that's why I published one paper in the IJOPM, so about the resilience. Yes, so I was very familiar with the concept, but in Korean academia, so it wasn't very familiar. So that's why I would like to introduce the concept and also giving some more conceptualization of supply chain resilience to the academia. So that was the main purpose of this research. So, as for the research background, as you may imagine, so the global value chain has been stagnated since 2011. Yes, so before then, so the participation into the global value chain has been increased a lot, but after that it was stagnated. One main reason may be the role of China. So the role of China has been stagnated as a factory of the world. Yes, so that's why the global value chain hasn't been very diversified and also hasn't been intensified since then. And the other problems were so the trade conflicts between China and the USA, as you may imagine, and also Australia and China. Yes, so there are still some conflicts, and also Korea and Japan. Yes, so some protectionism, and also some kind of trade wars. Yes, so that may have disrupted so the global value chain and other things. And as you know, so COVID-19 pandemic has shifted all the global supply chains. So after then, so many companies are considering local sourcing, near sourcing, and also reshoring. Yes, so that can affect the global value chain because the global value chain will need some procurement and sourcing and also marketing, sales of the products across the world. But now it has been restricted since the occurrence of the COVID-19 pandemic. So there are many increasing uncertainties in global supply chains. That means it is not very stable anymore. Yes, so even though the global value chains and also the businesses were very successful for the last 10 years or 20 years, but now the businesses need to think about the new way to cope with the ever-changing environments of the international trade. So that's why many Korean firms are now starting to think about the concept of resilience and also how to build the resilience in their company. So that is the main topic of the businesses in Korea. So I would like to contribute to the talk of resilience in the industry. Yeah, so I have done some literature review. So as you know, there are so many studies on supply chain resilience in the academia. So outside Korea, I should say. Yes. So I can start from the seminal work by Rice and Kaniato in 2003. Yes. So I don't know whether you can agree with this work as a seminal work, but anyway, I believe that they have used the resilience and also the subtitle of their research in 2003 was very insightful to me. So that's why I normally say, oh yes, so they have given very good insight to the academia. I normally say about that. And according to Kochan and Nowicki in 2018, because they have done the systematic literature review, as the previous present has done, yes, so they have reviewed 55 papers on supply chain resilience. Yes, so, no. So they have done more than that. They have found 55 papers in 2017. In 1 year, there were 55 papers on supply chain resilience, and the number is increasing. Yes, so that is a good sign. Many researchers are now aware of the supply chain resilience. When I started my PhD thesis, actually there were many studies on resilience, but now there are a lot. And supply chain resilience in essence, so definitions, I should say, it is the capability to overcome risks and disruptions in supply chains. So many researchers used different definitions, but the core thing about their definitions is this one. So the resilience concept are interchangeably used with robustness, reliability, agility, and flexibility, according to Kochan and Novicki. But some researchers distinguished those concepts, such as Klebe et al. 2010 and my research in 2018, tried to distinguish these concepts. Yeah, so after doing the literature review, I found that there are not many studies on supply chain resilience in South Korea, and also limited application of the resilience to ever-changing global supply chain context. So that's why I set up some research objective, such as this. So the number one objective is to analyze the structure of supply chain resilience for the comprehensive understanding of the concept. So I would like to see the interactions of the core competencies of resilience. And also the second objective was to discuss how to facilitate supply chain resilience in the context of shifts in global supply chains. Yes, so there are two objectives in this research. So for this research, I chose one very great research, in my opinion, yes, so by Petit et al. in 2010. Yes, so according to their research, they have suggested 14 capability factor, but I changed it to the competencies because I believe that resilience is the capability. So that's why these factors should be, it is a capability factor, so that is fine probably. Yes, so competencies. So among that, I removed security out of these 14. So I used the 13 factors. The reason was I have done some interviews with the practitioners, and practitioners was very curious about including the security. So that's why, and they said the security will have no relations with other factors. You may not agree with this one, but in my interviews, the practitioners said that, so that's why I removed the security and then used the 13 factors for their interactions and relationships. So as for the research method, I used the interpretive structural modeling, ISM. Yes, so probably you may be very familiar with this one. Yes, so there are 7 steps, and the main purpose of this ISM is to graphically illustrate the relationship between elements. Yeah, so I used the 13 elements. So there were 78 pairwise relationships. So I asked the 3 practitioners in the supply chain with more than 10-year experience, and then they have given me the contextual relationship, and then I analyzed the contextual relationships by the ISM steps, and then compare the findings with the supply chain disruptions and recovery graph by Sheffy and Rice in 2005. So I will show you the results. So after the ISM analysis, I found that the 13 elements of the supply chain resilience can be structured like this. Yes, so at the bottom, so there are 3 factors such as collaboration, organization, market position. So they can have impact on other factors of supply chain resilience competencies. And on the top of that, so anticipation and financial strengths can be placed. And then the upper level is efficiency, dispersion, and visibility. And then above that, capacity, adaptability, and then above that, flexibility in sourcing and flexibility in order fulfillment. And it goes to recovery. Recovery is the top element in this structure. So some clever colleagues may understand this one very well, but I try to interpret this model by using Sheffy and Rice model in 2005. So the right one, so the right graph is the Sheffy and Rice graph, and then the left one is the result of my research. So I grouped the 13 elements into 3 groups. So Group A, they are located at the top of this model. So recovery, flexibility in sourcing, flexibility in order fulfillment capacity, and adaptability. So they are competencies for initial responses and recovery. Yeah, initial responses and recovery to reduce LB in the initial impact. LB means this one. So in the, I'm going to use this pen here. LB is here. It is the likelihood, probability. So in this graph, so it has got performance on the y-axis and time on the x-axis. So it is the performance change according to the time when a disruption is made, disruption occurs. So when the disruption occurs, yes, there can be some initial impact. So the performance level will go down to the undesirable level. And then some companies can recover very soon after the initial impact, but unfortunately, some other companies will suffer more with the subsequent impact. So that is the highlight of the chef and rice in this graph. So this Group A competencies can determine this LB. So if the companies can have this Group A competencies, so they can recover just after the initial impact. So it can reduce the LB because it is about the initial recovery and also initial capability. And the other thing is, so even though there can be some subsequent impact, so these competencies can minimize the PC. PC is the negative impact. The magnitude of the negative impact, and also TB plus TC, so that is the time. So these competencies can shorten the time. That means very initial recovery and also very fast recovery can be done by these kind of competencies. Yeah, the middle one is slightly different. It is Group B. So I'm gonna name those factors: efficiency, dispersion, visibility, anticipation, and financial strength. Actually, they are related to preparedness. So these competencies will prepare and aware disruptions to avoid the initial impact. So it is very related to the robustness of the supply chain. So even though there are some disruptions, these supply chains can cope with those kind of disruptions and risk. So they can. So that's why I said. So these competencies can avoid the initial impact LA, or minimize PA plus PB. That means even though the performance level can go down, it will not go down under 0. Yeah. So these competencies will do that, and also they can increase TA. Increasing TA means so the time is increasing before the subsequent impact. That means the companies will have more time to think about the responses and also prepare the responses for the subsequent impacts, so they can deal with the disruptions and also subsequent impacts very, very well. Group C, at the bottom. So collaboration, organization, market position. As you may imagine, so these are the inter-organizational and also intra-organizational things. So capabilities. So these are the fundamental competencies requiring long-term strategies. They are not very short-term strategies or mid-term strategies. They are long-term strategies to build up other competencies, because they will affect all other competencies like this. Okay, so these are the findings. Yeah, so that's it. Yeah, so it is simple, but try to give some more insights in the ever-changing situation, because many companies in Korea, especially the shipper companies, so they are struggling in losing their normal trade routes, and also sometimes they need to change their suppliers or their customers in the ever-changing situations. So if they can anticipate those kind of changes, so these kind of competencies can help them. Yes. So in my paper, I have given some more details about each each competencies according to Petit et al. Because Petit et al. Paper, so they have listed up so many good ideas. So I applied the same ideas to the international trade situations. So the main findings of my paper is the three groups of supply chain resilience competencies, which are interrelated but will have different impacts on the disruption stages, as I've shown you. And short-term, long-term competencies to augment supply chain resilience in the shifting global supply chains. So they are the main findings. And then contributions to the academia, so interpretation of the structure of resilience competencies, so that future research can adopt this theoretical conceptualization. I compared my ISM findings with the existing discussion by Sheffield and Rice. Yes, so, and also my research finding is also linked to the preparedness and response recovery categorization that the previous presenter has also used. And also to the practitioners, some suggestions of the ways to enhance supply chain resilience with short-term, long-term priorities. So these are the contributions of my research. Yeah, so that's it for me. Thank you very much. So if you have any questions, I heard that there is a separate session. Yes, so you can ask me a question, or otherwise you can leave me an email and then I can answer your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Quek, for a very, very enlightening structural analysis of supply chain resilience core competencies. Kamsahamnida. I have to move on very quickly now. We are running a bit short of time. And our third presentation is by Associate Professor Larissa Stasenko from the University of South Australia. Professor Stasenko is going to show us how supply chain resilience could be enhanced and vulnerabilities to major disruptions reduced with a good understanding of supply chain capabilities by drawing on evidence from South Australia defense and mining equipment and technology services sectors. Professor Stasenko researches complex adaptive system and the application of network analysis to uncover structural patterns and dependencies impacting the performance of supply networks. She's also an accomplished researcher, having published in many international journals, including Industrial Marketing Management, Supply Chain Management, Global Operations and Strategic Sourcing, and Entrepreneurship Research journals. Professor Stasenko holds honors degrees in mechanical engineering, system engineering, and PhD in engineering and project management. Over to you, Professor Stasenko. The floor is yours. You there?
Yes, thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you for having me here. Let me share my screen now. Do you see my screen? Hello?
Yes, we can see.
Yes, we can see.
Perfect. Do you see the presentation? I hope so. Thank you again very much to the RMIT team for the opportunity to showcase the research and for organizing this amazing event, which is very timely. And as kindly introduced, I'm going to talk about the supply network structure, capability, and how they relate to resilience. And my background was largely in mining and recently in defense sectors. So I would focus today on the 2 points. First, I would like to talk about the findings very briefly from the recent research we did in South Australian maritime and aerospace sector, looking at defense manufacturing companies, supply chains, trying to identify how the supply chains are structured and what disruptions they experienced as a result of COVID-19, and also what strategies did they put to mitigate the risks and what type of capabilities they identified that needed to be developed. But also we were interested in what is the future insight on how Australia can build a self-reliant and resilient supply chains in the future, in particular in defense sector. And also I would like to touch upon a methodology that we are currently using while consulting the government in how we can identify the local capabilities and provide an effective visualization tool to be able to match the demand for the future projects in mining and defense sectors. So just a brief background about the projects and where we are coming from. In mining, the recent projects that we did was for Department of State Development, where we were mapping supply chain networks to understand the capabilities and connections. And currently I'm involved in the Primary Research and Industry Fund Consortium, where we are developing advanced sensing, data analytics and IoT type of technologies and integration approach to increase visibility and integration of the mining value chains as another important antecedent for resilience. In the defense sector, as I will focus today, I will talk about the recent disruptions in defense sector, and currently we're also working with Defense West, looking at their capabilities and their relation to the key defense domains. So focusing first on defense manufacturing sector and the strategies to mitigate the risks. We all know that, and we spoke about at length today, that actually COVID-19 has highlighted the risks in global supply chains that always were there, but were not really brought to attention of the companies. And with reduced lead times and reduced inventory levels, just-in-time deliveries, companies got quite complacent with being tightly integrated into global supply chains. And if we look at the defense context, I guess the COVID-19 has exposed even more threats because, as we said, other types of black swan events such as trade wars, planned human interventions for commercial or political reasons also present a threat for the sovereign nations. And I guess now that we focus in more than ever on building self-reliant, resilient, sovereign and secure supply chains with the consideration of onshoring, reshoring, and seeing how we can build local manufacturing base to fill the gaps from the overseas supply. So the recent research that we did is quite a small scale, but with some depth, which I won't be able to go due to the time constraints. We look into 9 case studies of defense manufacturing companies, interviewed primes, a range of staff within primes, but also reviewing their documentation to understand how their supply chains, supply networks are structured. What is the percentage of supply from overseas? And as very rightly Professor Quadros said, and the Priyo outlined in his presentation, each supply chain is highly idiosyncratic, and the resilience means different things and different strategies can be applied depending on the size of the company and the nature of the industry the company operates in, as well as the manufacturing process and design process that they adopt. So we looked at a range of different supply chains, for example, prime in maritime sustainment and development. We look into aerospace, we looked into cooling equipment, refrigeration equipment, hydraulics and pneumatics, electronic equipment supply, diesel generation. And for all of the supply chains, they look quite differently. There are different mechanisms that actually underpin the nature of relationships, and it impacts significantly on the type of strategies that the companies can apply to mitigate the risks of recent disruptions. But to talk about in general, very general, due to time constraints, we found that there is a large spectrum of dependency in Australian manufacturing sector, from bespoke equipment and top 5 critical components for vessels, which expose the dependency of Australian industry on foreign IP and design. And I guess that was the key sentiment from the companies, that if Australia wants to build a resilient sovereign supply chains, we need to move from the dependency on foreign design and IP. And that it's not an easy step. It requires a totally different approach. So, for example, currently Australian industry participate in supply chains mostly from the perspective of so-called engineering delegation, which means that they retrofit or overhaul existing equipment on the basis of the foreign design, and they require the technical teams. And this disruption highlighted such issues as inability for technical teams to come from overseas to install a certain part of equipment. So there are multiple examples, there's just not much time to talk about it, but that's one of the important points. On another side of the spectrum, we have those intermediate manufacturing goods where we have a reliance on Asian manufacturers and raw materials, as you can see here, for example, grades of aluminium, steel and titanium, and etc. So that had a particular strong impact on Australian defense manufacturing sector. Just talking briefly about the highest disruption was felt in electronic and electrical industries, as you probably all know. And there was an interesting sentiment that despite of the objective factors, such, for example, the increased freight costs and rise in US dollars and reduced diverted capacity of the overseas supplies to produce national critical goods, there was also an idea that there was a fabricated scarcity and manipulation by global distributors. And also these pandemics really highlighted dependence of Australian SMEs in electrical and electronic industries on these global distributors. And interestingly enough, in the face of disruptions, these big companies, and I think it was picked up by Christopher and Peck a long time ago, they usually focus on fulfilling the big markets. And because Australia is a small market, Australian orders were pushed back to the queue. And still the increasingly time, up to 20 times, increase in prices up to 5 times. And those supplies are held captive in the global supply chains. That means that they have limited capacity to switch because of industry around the globe experience the same issues. Or they have, for example, very strong relational component when they're dependent on the foreign OEM or dependent on the key vendor. So all of this diversification, alternative sourcing strategies don't really work in those types of supply chains. So again, we found a spectrum of the ways how the supply chains operate and what strategies companies actually can apply. There is just one insight on how we classify the strategies that we found, and that's the reason why I asked the Professor Quadras a question. We looked into organizational level or so-called team level, seeing how the companies can sustain the business during the pandemics, because there was a need to comply to health and safety issues, split teams to be able to sustain operations in case one of the team members can fall sick. But also, of course, the supply chain resilience strategies that they actually adopted, first to anticipate and prepare for disruption, second to respond and recover, and third to learn and grow from the pandemics. And again, we have a spectrum of strategies here, which I probably talk about here, that the primes, they actually, of course, more sophisticated. They have well-developed supply chains. Aerospace industry had no problem switching supplies because it's highly standardized, while maritime is much more specification-led, very bespoke, and they really thought about how they can accommodate production schedule, how they can make their workforce available to accommodate delivery delays, how they can structure their supply base to understand the uncertainties around delivery. So there's a lot what the primes adopted. But if we look at the local suppliers and small firms, as we said, they have very limited capacity to re-engineer and restructure their supply chain. So they had to be agile, responsive, frequently communicate with the partners and on the downstream and upstream side, and also collaborate locally. Again, it's nothing new as compared to the literature. It's just talking about there are a lot of nuances that can be brought forward, and building up on those nuances, we need to think about how we can actually make effective change in the local supply chains. Another aspect to highlight is that we found that supply chain visibility is still at the core of the resilience capabilities. Because, say, on the prime side, being able to work beyond the tier one, and we all know that with COVID-19 highlighted that problem. We usually don't see that disruption is coming because it comes from the lower tier supplies that you may be not even aware of. So it's really ring the bell for the primes to go beyond the tier one supplies. While the small companies, again, they pretty much have opaque supply chains and they're not able to do that. But the visibility, we found that those companies who were proactive, being able to map out their supply chain, to map out their value chains, actually develop strategies to be able to onshore a significant part of the activities before the pandemic hit. So building up on that, again, in alignment with the previous speakers, there is certain a need to develop collaboration and partnership with OEM for the knowledge transfer if we go ahead. There is a need to design for Australian capabilities, materials and standards if we want to build self-reliant sovereign supply chains in the future. But that requires significant uplift in local capabilities, as we all know, advanced manufacturing, 3D printing, computer-aided design, engineering design. So if the maturity of industry has to grow if we want to move to those collaborative design approaches. Just briefly touching on supply networks as well. This is the approach that we use to enhance and increase the visibility of local supply chains, again, to assist that issue of if we are to reshore, we need to understand the local capabilities. We need to understand what is available out there, so the overseas primes would not resort back to their global supply chains, to the overseas supply chains, but are able to efficiently use the local capabilities. So we are using so-called supply network analysis approach, where we're using the largest Australian database about local capabilities, and this platform also has a opportunity to for primes to submit tenders. So we're using network analysis to understand the structure of the supply network and to understand how companies are linked together within supply chains. It also provides a tool for visualization clusters of capabilities. So say if we have a measured defense program which requires CNC machining capability, we're able to identify the cluster of companies who have that capability and to identify geographic position tiers and etc. So here is just an example of the research that I published a long time ago. This is the supply network using that industry database that we visualized. You can see that how the supply network looks like, what its structure, and if we're looking at the complex network analysis, we can understand what's the clustering, the coefficient, network density. But this is from the more research perspective, not from the practical perspective. We can identify the clusters and modules within the supply chain, which again gives insight of how well it's connected, how well it's structured, and it obviously has a theoretical implication for its robustness and resilience. But coming down to a practical aspect and coming down to individual level of the companies, this type of platform models allows to have a good representation of how the companies are located in terms of their capabilities, their industry markets where they supply to, what's the capability strengths. So if we're again talking about engineering design capability or 3D printing capability, where those companies are located in Australia, what markets do they supply, what tiers in the supply chain they're located, what is their profile. So there's this kind of insight that we can do with a network model. Here is another example of how we can look into the companies, their location within the supply chain network. In other words, if the company is an integrator and it's centrally located within the network, it represents that, that node that in case it collapses, it will have an impact on the whole cluster or the network of capabilities. So again, it's just a way of, it's just insights that you can get from adopting that supply network analysis modeling. Just to talk further on that, we also run a survey of the, and that this research has been done in applying supply network analysis. We run a survey with the companies that are part of this network to understand what is their ability to adapt and respond to mining industry demand spikes, because you know mining is one of those cyclical industries where demand dependent on fluctuating commodity prices. So initially I started my resilience work, or for that matter supply chain mapping work, back in 2014, looking into how South Australian mine equipment and technology sector is able to pivot and adapt its capabilities in response to change in demand. So these are the structural equation modeling that we did in understanding how the centrality within this network can impact the ability of a firm to pivot its capabilities and diversify across sectors and introduce new products. So this research has been published, and if you are interested, we looked at the relational aspect of the supply chain and also into the structural aspect, or as we call relational embeddedness and structural embeddedness. I took a more practical applied view. I didn't get into the depth of the conceptual definition because we are all experts in that. So just to introduce a different views on how we can actually build self-reliant and resilient supply chains. Here are my selected publications, and thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you, Professor Stensenko, for your very, very perceptive presentations on your research. Now, I've been told we are running very, very behind. So we are not going to have 5 minutes or 10 minutes Q&A session as scheduled. There was a question posted on the chat box by Victor, Professor Victor Jakara, on why is there so few qualitative studies on supply chain resilience. So there should be scope for this approach, perhaps. And I think Professor Shyam Raman's answered the questions on behalf of Priyo and says that we can discuss. But Priyo, if you have anything to respond, can you have 30 seconds, or you actually posted that? And I would leave it at that. You have posted your answer on the chat box. I will leave it at that. So what I like to is just very quickly to so-called summarize and ask one question in which I will ask the three presenters to have 1 minute to respond. I would think that all of you would agree with me that these three are excellent presentations, all on these key concepts, key notions of supply chain resilience, which is the focus of these symposiums. What I'd like to ask the three presenters to tell us is how we can draw the fine words that each of you have done to create synergy and move forward in this very important area of supply chain resilience. So Priyo has looked at so-called the literature, and Professor Quek has completed a structural analysis of this supply chain resilience core competencies, and Professor Sinstenko told us about the findings of her study. So I believe that there's a lot of things that we can pull from here, and I'd like the three presenters to tell us how they see they can combine their work with each other and move this field forwards in a productive manner. So as I say, please, everyone, 1 minute, please. So Priyo, starting with you. Priyo, you there?
Yes, thanks, Bui. I think you're correct. Like, the three papers that we presented, they are very much related. So my one is a broad and overarching understanding about the discipline and what we already know and what can be done. And but in terms of the Larissa and the other presenter, they really made a good presentation on a specific topic, like on the supply chain resilience and using the ISM model and other theoretical perspective. I think the synergies that you said is we all focused on the supply chain resilience capability building and for better future or the better supply chain resilience.
All right, thank you, Priyo. Professor Quek, would you like to give your view on this, please?
Yes, so thank you very much. Yes, so actually, so these three research, actually, they are very interconnected. And I think the first paper is more about the finding out the real concept and also how the researchers are doing so on the topic. And also the third presentation was about the application of the concept to the real world industry. So in that sense, actually, so what I think it is lacking in the academia is how to really apply the resilience concept to the industry, and also how to build up the resilience concept and then build up the resilience. Yes, so proving the idea is one very important thing. Yes, so if I try to combine those ideas and also to make some synergies out of it, yes, and then I'm gonna definitely apply the conceptual ideas from the first two papers and then use them to the real world industry, like the third paper. So that is my opinion.
Thank you very much. Professor Sinstenko, what's your view?
Thank you very much, Professor Bui. I totally agree with Priyo work as well, because I think what currently exists in that area, that we have a very strong developed conceptual understanding of what resilience is. And we have those emerging research which really tackles the problems that we experience, and how to bridge that gap. I guess that has to be our next goal in that area.
Thank you, Professor Sinstenko. I think all three of you basically agree that this so-called that you three can actually work together in many productive ways. So I will leave it to the three of you to continue on this, and I'll pass the floor back to Professor Win Tai now. Over to you, Win.
Thank you, Bui. Sorry, I lost the connection in between.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks a lot, Bui, for your excellent moderation of the first session. So I would like now to invite Assistant Professor Hui Mi Chang from PNU to chair and moderate the second research showcase session, please. So Hui Mi, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your introduction. And as the panel discussion is still left, let me start the second session right away. And also, please, as we are lagging behind the schedule, and please, the presenters should use make the best use of your time to make your presentation be finished on time. So the first presentation is about the logistic cooperation in the Far East by the Assistant Professor Enrico D'Agostini. And he has a lot of experience in the shipping industry as freight forwarder and ship agent and ship brokers. And also he is actively participating in the government project as well as publications. So the screen is yours, Professor D'Agostini.
Thank you very much, Professor Chang. Can you see me?
Not yet. Yes, yes.
Yes, let me share the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see the PPT?
Yes.
Right. Okay, I'll start and I'll try not to waste much time. I'll try to be within the 15 minutes. So my presentation is about an unpublished paper titled Logistics Cooperation in the Far East, Prioritizing Supply Chain Requirements to Strengthen Intra-Regional Resilience of Maritime Transport Networks. So very quickly, the index, I'll provide a bit of background of the research question, the originality of this research, the design, which comprised two different methods, text mining and Q method, gap analysis, and some practical implications. So very quickly about the background, efficient supply chain networks have been recognized as enablers of competitiveness and economic growth worldwide. Policymakers and regulators are well aware that successful implementation of policy on transport infrastructure, free trade areas, and regulatory framework can lead to enhanced logistics performance. Therefore, we look at this study from a public perspective rather than a private industry vision. However, the recent COVID-19 pandemic has heavily disrupted supply chains and hardly tested the resilience of both private and public organizations alike. And we are focusing on maritime transport networks. So particularly in the private organization domain, shipping lines have found so many challenges during the past years. And public organizations are a bit in the similar situations. If we think about port authorities, as well as custom organizations, for example, worldwide. Therefore, organizations are today required to enhance resilience through efficient, flexible, and adaptive business models. So this publication, this paper, has comprised three different research questions. The first one, we want to look at previous area of logistics cooperation among the government of China, Republic of Korea, and Japan. Therefore, we are focusing on one specific region, which is very important from a logistics perspective. Second, we want to look at what are current important areas of logistic cooperation during a post-COVID, or better said, during a COVID-19 pandemic. Third, what can we learn from the findings? What are potential implications and policy recommendations, particularly from a public perspective again? So how can the government of China, Korea, and Japan cooperate with each other? The novelty of this research, the originality lies in the fact that this is the first attempt to analyze past ministerial resolutions on logistics and supply chain networks in the Far East region. Secondly, again, it focuses on public policy perspective. Third, it's very important to find some key areas for cooperation to draw potential policy recommendation and probably solve some issues that were highlighted during the pandemic in maritime transport networks. So the research design, there is 4 different steps. In the first steps, we apply a text mining and a network analysis to find out what are the most important area of logistics cooperation in past ministerial resolution of the 3 countries. In step 2, we try to find out what are current priority areas for logistics cooperation to enhance resilience in the region. Step 3, there is a gap analysis between the finding in step 1 and step 2. And step 4, there is some policy recommendations. So the first step is about text mining. And text mining, we collected past joint resolutions of China, Republic of Korea, Japan from 2006 to 2020. These statements, these resolutions are published every 2 years. Therefore, there were a total of 7 resolutions that were combined in a single document. The idea was to extract the most frequent terms with the text mining technique. This is an example of the China-Japan-Korea Ministerial Conference. This is a resolution for 2018, and there is so many areas of supply chains that are discussed in this paper. So we want to find what are these areas since 2006. Once we extracted the most frequent terms, we also perform a degree centrality and a community betweenness with a network analysis. Nevertheless, with the degree centrality, we find the most central terms in the network that was created. But the words, as you can see here, are rather general: logistics, transport, cooperation, port, and so on. Therefore, we could not really find any useful results out of this analysis. That is why we perform a community betweenness analysis. And in this case, we were able to find 6 interconnected clusters. So really, these are 6 different areas which in past ministerial resolution were discussed and were deemed to be of key importance. Number 1, emissions in logistics. Number 2, port logistics cooperation and information exchange. Number 3, standards and regulations. Number 4, technology in logistics. Number 5, Far East intermodal transport network. Number 6, energy efficiency. So in the first step, these are sort of findings. These are the areas that were pivotal for the 3 governments. Nevertheless, in the step 2, we want to find out what people think that should be the area of cooperation to enhance resilience in the region. In this case, we apply a Q methodology that some of you might be aware of. And this is a useful method because it is a mix of qualitative and quantitative research, and it helps evaluating the subjectivity and opinions of respondents. So to efficiently implement a Q method, there is 6 steps that need to be followed. First, construction of a concourse. So there is a literature review. We looked at different areas of cooperation in logistics, and we came up with 160 statements. Step number 2, production of Q statements. So we reduced, with the help of practitioners and university professor, the statements to 35. Then there was a selection of participants. The Q method, I must say, it's very useful because it doesn't require very large population of respondents. We selected 31 participants with different backgrounds, with different genders and work experiences. Steps number 4, it's a very important step in Q method. each statement was printed on a card, and each card was taken randomly and was placed on a grid according to the agreement or disagreement of each respondent. Number 5, we performed a correlation and factor analysis, and we found 3 different factors. 6 is about the interpretation. So this is a bit of the demographics of the respondents. Differ in gender, age, and profession. Particularly the profession, we took participants from shipping, from logistics, freight forwarders, port authorities, and research institute were part of this survey. Again, the questionnaire, I did not list all the 35 questions, but we included different topics. For example, seafarer status, very important during COVID-19, supply chain corridors, customs, emergency responses, risk management, R&D, digitization, environment. So there were many areas actually that were included in the questionnaire. And this is an example of how the actual participant were asked to respond and place each card in one single cell according to agreement or disagreement on the topic. So the result, we performed a factor analysis, and we came up with 3 different factors. Factor 1, which included 11 participants, factor 2 with 12 participants, factor 3 with 3 participants. Actually, it's less than 31. There were a few participants that were disregarded from the analysis because they did not show any specific statistical pattern in the peculiarity of the factors. So these are the results of the Q method. We have factor 1, which was named the pandemic solution seeker. And on the top right, we have the most agreed statements. And the statements are, which were mostly agreed, were mainly about the seafarer crisis that occurred during COVID-19. Seafarer could not embark and disembark, and these have very significant repercussion on the resilience of supply chain. Seafarers that cannot embark and disembark can bring on accidents and fatigue on board ships. So they agreed that main areas that should be discussed by the governments should be helping seafarers, installation of medical facilities in ports, embarkation, disembarkation, ensuring berth to seafaring pandemic, and faster custom procedure to ensure smooth supply chains flows. Nevertheless, they disagreed on autonomous shipping, which is a bit in contrast with what was agreed, the promotion of joint reports on logistics performance, and standardization and exchange of data. They did not agree with these statements. The second factor that was extracted out of the analysis was the cooperation builder, and they had a similar view with factor 1 on which statement, which areas were the most important ones. They agreed that there was a need for fast custom procedure, medical facility installation, embarkation and disembarkation of seafarer, and ensuring berth to seafarers in pandemic. They disagreed on other areas, such as joint discussion on the creation of level playing field. So, for example, no public incentives to ports and so on. Enhance logistic resilience via knowledge sharing, improve education and training for public officer, creation of appointment system between shipping lines and ports. Finally, the third factor was renamed the digital technology and best practices adapter, as they strongly agreed on a need for increased cooperation in the field of education and training, information exchange on environmental issues, sharing of best practices, digitization in logistics. They disagree on import-export procedure, improving business liquidity by extending the payment of custom duties, and holding joint initiative for cooperation in the field of logistics. So there are also some statements, some areas where all the participants had a consensus on, particularly, again, as we said, seafarers, tariff suspensions, promotion of ports as recycling hubs, production of green performance indicator, smart planning in logistics, and cooperation in recycling. So if we compare what we find with the text mining technique and the network analysis, we came up with 5 main areas of past discussion of the three governments, which were about environment, information exchange, standardization and regulation, trade and transport, and energy efficiency. With the Q method, on the other hand, we came up with the idea that participants showed agreement on seafarer support, coordinated approach to digital technologies, adoption of best practices, knowledge sharing, risk management, and green logistics, as well as new business opportunity for ports. So the implication, these are 3 main areas that I've listed here, and that should be sort of an area of discussion for the government of China, Korea, and Japan for enhancing resilience. We believe that public organizations and governments do have a role to play in enhancing supply chain resilience. Number 1, seafarer and logistics operator. So it was evident that in COVID-19 pandemic, a reactive approach for seafarers problem, embarkation, disembarkation didn't work. Therefore, risk management and a proactive approach is probably needed. Furthermore, cooperation and coordination of governments on seafarer flows and medical checks in pandemic can support the adaptability of maritime networks. The second one is standardization and data sharing. This can provide the ability to enhance the efficiency and the speed of supply chains in the region and responses to crisis, particularly for critical infrastructure like ports. Furthermore, standardization and sharing of data can provide objective KPIs on operational matters and support better and faster decision-making. Finally, a third area is about environmental issues. Environmental and ecological resilience can be a core enabler of supply chain resilience. For example, the use of multiple energy sources and developing natural disaster recovery plans can enhance resilience of shipping and ports. Finally, respondents also show that ports can adopt new business model. For example, port as recycling hubs. This can also increase the organizational resilience in pandemics and in disrupting situations. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. Let us move on to the second presentation entitled Supply Chain Resilience Capability Development, Antecedent, Measurement, Strategy Development, Moderator, Mediator, and Outcome Constructs. This study was prepared by Maruf Chaudhuri, a senior lecturer of Operations and Supply Chain Management, Business School of University of Technology, Sydney in Australia. And he, in addition to the academic career, he has professional experience in different industrial settings as an advisor and also procurement managers. So the screen is yours. Can you hear me? Maruf, Professor Maruf Chaudhuri. Can you hear me? Can you please answer? Are you ready for the presentation? Hello. It's your turn. Professor Maruf Chaudhry.
Maruf, if you
yes, please. Yeah, okay.
Please unmute. Maybe if you are trying to talk, Maruf, please unmute because we can't hear you. Thank you.
Hello. Dr. Maruf.
Excuse me, I think he's struggling to turn on the audio. So can you just give a couple of, just a minute?
Okay, no problem. It's
Maybe I think for me, I think since Maruf is still trying a way to unmute.
okay. We can change Jessica's seat, right?
That's right. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So we will have the next presentation first. So the next presentation is about the supply chain resilience in the automobile industry and its financial performance. And this was prepared by Gina Kim, an assistant manager of Renault Samsung Motors. And she is a PhD candidate of GSIS, Busan National University, and this research was prepared with the Professor Kim Seok-soo. And so the screen is yours. Can you start yet?
Hello?
Yeah. Can you share your screen with us? Yes. Yeah, we can see. 네, 시작하세요. You can start.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm pleased to have this chance to give my presentation. The topic of my presentation is supply chain resilience in the automobile industry and its financial performance. It's based on my previous study on Journal of Korean Trade. I will divide my presentation into 5 parts. The presentation will focus on methodology, result, and conclusion. Before we go any further, I will explain some glossary of main factors of supply chain resilience. There are 4 factors in my research: supply chain preparedness, alertness, agility, and continuity. Preparedness is referred to the development of pre-disaster systems structures and processes through supply chain planning, design, and training before a crisis occurs. Alert this is the ability to identify various change or crises occurring in the external environment or internal supply chain in a timely manner. Agility is the ability to quickly respond to real change by reorganizing supply chain process. And continuity is ensuring that the company's core operations are continuously maintained in any crisis or normalized in the shortest possible time. Let's begin with introduction. The COVID-19 has been affecting our industry even after many years from 2019. Unlike in the past, active movement between countries has hurt not only mankind but also our industry due to the rapidly spreading virus around the world. The COVID-19 pandemic has been one of the most serious supply chain risks in recent history. In particular, the automobile industry has a high dependence on overseas supply chains, resulting in immediate and significant ripple effect of production and sales stoppage. For example, in February last year, China imposed a policy to suspend operation to prevent the spread of COVID-19. At that time, there was a disruption in supply of parts that produced 8% of them in China. As a result, production of 2,600 automakers and part makers in Korea has been suspended. This led to a decrease in export performance and operating profit, which adversely affected the financial performance of the company. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the nation's lack of resilience as a result of collective failure to assess and respond to risk in rapidly changing the world. That's why I choose this topic and industry. As a recent manufacturing trend has changed to multi-species small production, it has become more difficult to predict demand for its item, making companies vulnerable to expected variables. In today's unpredictable and dynamic business environment, global supply chain resilience is becoming more important. Next, I'd like to talk about research gap. Some studies on supply chain resilience have been conducted in logistics company in Korea, but research on supply chain resilience and financial performance has been insufficient, especially among manufacturers. At this level, this study is necessary. In Korea, empirical research linking supply chain resilience directly to corporate financial performance is rare, especially for the auto industry, which has been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. This study focused on adding a factor called supply chain continuity to gain insight into the impact of supply chain resilience on the financial performance of company. This is objective and questions. This study has focused on the influence of supply chain resilience on the financial performance of automotive-related companies. The main objectives are to provide the need and proper direction of a change in perception of the supply chain resilience of company and to support manager investment decision. Our main question is a previous study, does supply chain preparedness, alertness, and agility affect the financial performance of the Korean auto industry? And what is the impact of supply chain continuity on financial performance? And Korea company has a process for resilience in supply chain, and what level is? Can you see my screen?
No. Dr. Maruf, can you please stop sharing your screen? Okay.
Can you see?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, but as we are running out of the time, and you can focus on your reader of your study, please. You can explain briefly about literature review. Yeah.
I only presentation only for supply chain resilience. This is literature review of supply chain resilience. According to a study by Lee, supply chain resilience is formed by three factors: preparedness, alertness, and agility, so that it can be prepared to withstand future change. Alertness and agility. This definition laid the foundation for hypothesis development to measure supply chain resilience in this study. Now let's move on to methodology. In this survey, a total of 23 measurement questions were measured on a Likert 5-point scale to measure the aforementioned theoretical variables. Data collected through the survey methods were statistically processed using SPSS. The main purpose of this study is to analyze the effect of supply chain resilience on management performance of auto part manufacturer. In particular, financial performance indicators were calculated as management performance variable and injected into the analysis. The survey was commissioned via email and writing, and an internet website-based survey was conducted. Over 300 people in charge of purchasing and procuring parts manufacturing partner company of domestic automaker were asked to respond to the survey. We elaborate on the result of survey. According to the survey, the gender of the final respondent was 82% for men. The respondent experience was the highest at 40% among those who had more than 10 years and less than 15 years. Respondent duties were directly related to purchasing, production management, and procurement, indicating that the response was consistent with a group of tests with a high understanding of the work. Company sales volume was 75% for less than 500 billion won a year, and 72.6% for company with 500 or less employees. So it is general size of domestic auto parts manufacturing. And before analyzing the effect of supply chain preparedness, alertness, agility, and continuity, the descriptive variable of this study, the statistic of the individual explanatory variable were first verified through descriptive statistical analysis. According to the analysis, supply chain agility is the highest average among the 4 factors that make up supply chain resilience, and the standard deviation is also the highest. indicating that supply chain agility is recognized more important than other supply chain resilience details. In fact, interviewer with manager of many.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you please speed up to share your findings due to the panel discussion? I'm so sorry about this.
Okay, I'll move to the
please. Yeah.
The main purpose was to present the effectiveness and strategic direction of supply chain management to Korean automotive parts manufacturers by reviewing and empirically verifying detailed factors of supply chain resilience. The study found that among the 4 key variables that consisted supply chain resilience, supply chain agility, and continuity factor have a statistically significant plus impact on an entity's financial performance. This is contribution. In this regard, this study is significant in that it empirically verified the effectiveness of supply chain resilience of Korean auto part manufacturers and presented its strategic implications. These findings are expected to serve as a good foundation for future researchers for the expansion of supply chain resilience studies. And contribution for industry, among the supply chain resilience factors, supply chain agility and continuity contribute significantly to a company's financial performance is a result of supporting existing overseas research results. The empirical analysis show that proactive capacity contribute significantly to a company's financial performance, while the reactive approach of supply chain agility is also an important approach to improve a firm's financial performance. The limitation is, in order to understand supply chain resilience, its effect on financial performance, there are fundamental limitations to survey-based research. So obtaining the appropriate respondent and sample population for all analysis is quite challenging. And it is difficult to fully overcome the limitation of fundamentally survey-based empirical research. In addition, this work did not include the contingent and contextual variables that affect the findings. Lastly, I'd like to talk about future research direction, including securing supply chain resilience can change the outcome of the empirical analysis due to situation variable. This is part of a subsequent work that shows that consideration is needed for various context variables. The study model validated the hypothesis using a simple analytic tool called multiple regression analysis and did not control the variable, resulting in change in the independent variable. We found that supply chain agility and continuity contribute highly to financial performance, and we could confirm the need for interest and continued strategic response. That's all I prepared.
Okay, thank you for your kind understanding and an interesting presentation. And Dr. Maruf, are you ready for your presentation?
Yes, I am ready. Can you hear me?
Yes, and please, you can focus on the core of your papers to save more time for the panel discussion, please.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
You need any help?
Can you see my slides, please?
Yes, we can see. So
Okay,
you can start. Yeah.
So thank you for inviting me for showcasing my research. In this presentation, I will be discussing about a holistic picture of resilience, starting from antecedents of supply chain resilience, then supply chain resilience as a focal construct of measurement, and finally consequences of resilience. And in between, I will also discuss the mediating factor between the antecedents and resilience, as well as resilience and the outcome constructs. So instead of presenting my recent research on COVID-19 and its implications and resilience strategies for mitigating COVID-19 impacts, I will discuss some of my previous research, and then I will go to a discussion on COVID-19 and resilience strategies for mitigating COVID-19 impact. So first paper that I'm going to discuss is about my 2015 paper published in Omega. It's about a multiple objective optimization based QFD approach for efficient resilience strategies to mitigate supply chain vulnerabilities. So in this paper, actually, what we have done, we have identified supply chain vulnerabilities in the context of apparel industry in Bangladesh. Then we prioritized the vulnerabilities. We identified in total 33 vulnerabilities. Then we prioritized 15 topmost vulnerabilities, and then we identified resilience strategies to mitigate those vulnerabilities. And once we identified resilience strategies, then what we have done is prioritizing the strategies using QFD matrix. And finally, we have conducted a multiple objective optimization technique in order to find optimal portfolio of strategies. So here is the findings from QFD matrix, which shows that we have 13 different strategies corresponding to 15 vulnerabilities. And out of these strategies, we find that strategy 4, strategy 5, strategy 4, strategy 6, strategy 8, and strategy 13 have got the highest importance. So after prioritizing the strategies, then what we have done, we have find out optimal portfolio strategies using multiple objective optimization. We have 3 objectives in this optimization. First one is relating to procurement related strategies, then processing related strategies, and third one is distribution related strategies. So when we run the optimization, then we found the optimal portfolio of strategies relating to procurement, processing or production, and distribution. So basically, we found efficient, resilient portfolio in order to help the decision maker to identify the best portfolio of strategies to mitigate their vulnerabilities. The second paper that I am discussing is about supply chain resilience scale development. And this is one of the few papers that deal with supply chain resilience scale development. We published this article in 2017 in International Journal of Production Economics. So as I mentioned, the aim of the paper is to develop a scale and validate the scale using a statistical technique. And the method that we applied is mixed method, both qualitative and quantitative. And this study has three phases. Study one is qualitative study to contextualize the findings from the literature and validate the findings from literature. And then in study two, we have conducted a survey, and we survey respondents around 300, and then we splitted the respondents
Hello, Maruf. I think you touched the mute button, so we can't hear you just now.
Oh,
Can you hear me now?
yes, but can we give you just 3 minutes for the to finalize our session? I'm so sorry about this.
Yeah, the thing is, I don't know what is the technical glitch. It's often being
Yeah, it sometimes happens. So we
Yeah.
understand. So can you focus on your findings and the main?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can skip the first part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we have found, we identified 12 different resilience capabilities, and we grouped those capabilities into proactive and reactive components, and also supply chain design components. As you see, proactive components have uh, 6 components: redundancy or backup capability, and then financial strength, marketing strength, then efficiency, integration, readiness, and then flexibility. Relating to reactive component, we find response and recovery, and relating to design component, we find density, complexity, and criticality. So what we then did after identifying and validating the resilience capability, we um, we conducted a predictive validity test with supply chain performance, and we have also introduced operational vulnerability as a mediating factor and tested how supply chain resilience capability can mitigate operational vulnerability and improve supply chain performance. So we identified that supply chain resilience capability has a direct influence on supply chain performance, and also have an indirect influence through operational vulnerability reduction. So this is a study 2, and in a study 3 we generalized the findings from our survey, and this generalization process in this generalization process we conducted further survey on 5 different industries, and then generalized our scale. So the third paper that I am discussing is about supply chain readiness, response, and recovery. In this paper, we used mixed method actually, and we used normal accident theory and high reliability theory in order to conceptualize the model. And we identified different antecedent factors of supply chain resilience. And the antecedents are supply chain orientation, supply chain risk management culture, then learning and development and supporting factors. And we find that supply chain uh, orientation has a direct influence on supply chain resilience, and it also has indirect influence through supply chain risk management culture. That is, supply chain risk management culture mediates the relationship between supply chain orientation and supply chain resilience. And the outcome construct in this model is supply chain performance. So the focal construct, that is supply chain resilience, is measured by readiness and response. Further, readiness is measured by some other constructs like flexibility, redundancy, visibility, and collaboration. And response and recovery has been measured by response and recovery capability. So basically, this model is relating to antecedent to focal construct supply chain resilience relationship, and we tested a mediation between antecedents and the resilience. In our previous paper, we have shown the mediating factor between
Sorry, Maruf. Sorry, Maruf. I think you're on mute again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So how long I was mute? I don't know why it is muting again and again.
Just for a second. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So in a conclusion that what I said is in this paper we have shown the antecedent to resilience relationship and the mediating factor between antecedent and the resilience. In the previous paper, what we have shown, resilience to outcome construct, that is resilience to performance relationship, and mediating factor as operational vulnerability reduction. So we have covered pretty much the antecedent factors, resilience, and the outcome constructs, and mediating factor between between antecedent and resilience, mediating factor between resilience and the outcome constructs by these two papers. Now this paper is relating to supply chain resilience for performance, role of relational practices and network complexities. So basically, it covers supply chain supply chain performance, supply chain resilience to performance relationship, and two situational or contextual variables. One is supply chain relational practice, and the other is supply chain network complexity. So we tested the operating context in which supply chain resilience is likely to enhance supply chain performance. And in this case, we adopted mixed method research, and this is the research model. You see the independent variable is supply chain resilience, and dependent variable is supply chain performance. And a situational variable or contextual variable like relational practices, which moderates the relationship between supply chain resilience and performance. And this moderating relationship further moderated by supply chain network complexity. And we found the relationship between resilience and performance is significant. Relational practice and performance is significant. The interaction of relational practice and resilience has impact on supply chain performance. On the other hand, network complexity negatively influence supply chain performance. We also find that interaction of network complexity and resilience positively influences supply chain performance. And interaction of network complexity and relational practice positively influences performance, though network complexity has a negative influence on performance, and network complexity has a negative influence on relational practice. We found the interaction effect is significant. We also find that the three-way interaction that is network complexity, relational practice, and resilience has significant influence on the performance.
I'm really sorry to tell you again that, but can you please speed up to finalize yours? Because of the,
I am almost
panel discussion. Sorry about this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all right. I understand the situation. Yeah, I am almost finished. So in this paper, what we have shown, we have tried to unveil the relationship between social capital and resilience, and three components of social capital: structural, relational, and cognitive capital, how it influences reactive aspect of organizational resilience and proactive aspect of organizational resilience. And we have seen structured capital has significant influence on proactive organizational resilience, and relational capital has significant influence on reactive organizational resilience. On the other hand, cognitive capital doesn't have influence on reactive, both proactive and reactive resilience. So that's the few projects that we have published among many. And now I'm quickly discussing about the ongoing projects relating to resilience and COVID-19 pandemic. So first paper is relating to developing resilience capability portfolio in the context of COVID-19. So in this case, we conducted three phases of study, interview, case studies, and asymmetric analysis. And we developed actually a methodology for developing a resilience portfolio. The other projects that ongoing relating to COVID-19 pandemic is resilient health service operations management. So here we identified health service operations challenges and resilience strategies to mitigate those challenges. And finally, we identified portfolio of resilience strategies. Another project is relating to resilience strategies to mitigate COVID-19 vaccine distribution challenges in resource poor economies in the context of Bangladesh, for example. So we identified vaccine distribution risk factors and challenges.
Yeah, sorry again. Can you please tell us about your last slide? Because many people are waiting for the panel discussion now.
Yeah, this is the last slide. So yeah, there are some other ongoing projects. I'm not going details of that. So so what, in a nutshell, what I try to present is my research journey relating to resilience antecedents, resilience capability development, strategy development, and consequences of resilience, mediating factor and moderating factor, and some of the ongoing projects. Thank you very much for your patience.
Okay, thank you very much for your wonderful presentation, and despite the technical difficulties, and I will conclude my session. So, Dr. Tai, you can start the panel discussion.
Yes, thanks so much, Wimi, for chairing these sessions. Yes, despite the fact that we have a bit of technical problem, but I think all the presentation have been very insightful, and I'm sure there will be a scope for collaborations between between us later on. So we will keep in touch with that. Now, obviously, I would like to start the panel discussions sessions. So as communicated previously to all registered participants that in the today's symposium, we have the honor to invite four panelists, discussion panelists. So we have Mr. Stuart Smith from Australia Post, Professor Jae Lee from Pusan National University, Mr. Kui-Chu Choi and Ms. Kang Ji-sun, who are currently based in Melbourne, from the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency. And this panel discussion will be moderated by my colleague, Professor Shamraman, from the same department, at RMIT. So before we move on, let me just very quickly introduce the panelists. So first of all, Mr. Stuart Smith is currently a freight and logistics executive with more than 25 years of experience across domestic and international market. And he has a very deep knowledge of the industry based on his experience leading operation, customer management, freight forwarding, custom clearance, and sales team. So currently he's in charge of the strategic account at Australia Post. But before that, he successfully ran DHL commercial operation across the northeast of America, from Washington to Canada and over the Pittsburgh in the United States. And we also have in the panel Professor Jae-woo Lee, and he is now a professor at the Graduate School of International Study, Busan National University in South Korea. And before joining the school, he has worked for the research institutes supported by the Korean government for over 10 years. And he has been involved in many research projects and academic papers on international trade and cooperation, industrial organization, law and economics, which are his main research interests. We also have the honor today to invite Mr. Kyu-Chu Choi, who is currently the Director General of the Korean Trade Investment Promotion Agency, or in short, KOTRA. So Mr. Choi is a Senior Trade Commissioner of KOTRA Melbourne Centre, based in Melbourne, and he has more than 20 years of trade and investment promotion experience between Korea and overseas, including the big city in the world like Dubai, Sydney, and Prague. Joining him in the panel is Ms. Kang Ji-sun, who is currently trade manager of KOTRA, and Ms. Kang is in charge of marketing and research. Over 8 years of experience, she provides her expertise in providing trade and marketing insight to the enterprises, both in Korea as well as Australia. And moderating the panel discussion session today is my colleague, Professor Sam Raman, one of the senior professors in the school. And without telling too much about him, he has a lot of experience in research, as well as the industry experience as well. So it's my honor now to invite Professor Sam, if you are ready now, to moderate the session. Professor Sam, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vin, and good afternoon to everyone. Of course, we are running a little bit late, but I think I still have to finish it by 5:30. So I'm hoping that the panel members would cooperate with me. Not to go too much detail into what happened this afternoon, but I would like to simply make a note that we all have listened to the keynote speeches and other research presentation. And of course, now is the time, as Vin has mentioned, for a panel discussion. This discussion would be around supply chain resilience strategies pre and post COVID-19. We, of course, would make an effort to understand its impact from Australia-Korea bilateral trade perspective. The format of the discussion is as follows. We'll start with few questions to the panel members, and that would be followed by Q&A from the floor. And I would close the session with few closing remarks. As Vin has already mentioned and introduced our honorable the member of the panel, but I would like to spell out that we do have Stuart Smith from Australia Post, Professor Lee from Pusan University, Kyu-Chu Choi and Kang Ji-sun, both are from the Korean Trade Investment Promotion Agency, and which is located in Melbourne. Please welcome our panel members. And of course, we have learned quite a lot about the supply chain and the trade resilience post-COVID, but would like to know a little bit more, perhaps, how the organizations have really set up their strategies and policies before COVID-19. Because we'd like to build the case, what actually happened during the COVID and what we need to do after the COVID. And that's why we'd like to know a little bit about what were the practices and the strategies that the organization put in place before COVID-19. So my first question to the panel is, to ensure the smooth trade transaction and flow of commodities between countries, what policy strategies had you been practicing in pre-COVID business context? Let me start with Stuart Smith.
Thank you, Sharman. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to all the delegates today from a customer perspective, but also a logistics provider perspective. So when I think about that question and ponder it from a business context perspective, customers had a really lean supply chains. They had optimized their supply chains very efficiently over the years, through Southeast Asia and particularly from Korea. So, probably the key thing would be visibility of their freight, really short lead times and production lead times when we think from, the time they receive the order through until the time that's delivered. Now, I'd probably park that because that's had a negative effect post-COVID when we look at the impact on the supply chain. Obviously, people play a key part in anyone's supply chain. Challenge we found here from an Australian perspective is a lack of talent coming into the supply chain field or people specialising in the discipline of supply chain. So that also was a negative leading into post-COVID times when we had a lack of professionals with the supply chain disciplines. So really, if I was to sum up, the key thing would be manufacturers or merchants, customers here in Australia had really refined their supply chains, made them really efficient and had cut a lot of fat out of their supply chain to make them really lean.
Okay. Thank you very much for your response, Stuart Smith. Professor Lee, what's your take on this? Professor Lee, can you hear me?
Okay. I can speak now, right?
Please.
Okay, thank you. Actually, before COVID-19, I think in Korea and in Australia too, the business and government were, almost unaware of the supply chain, the importance and the value of it. And now we experience the COVID-19, and we experience the serious, the damage of our supply chain and some resulting economic